Marvel, son of Poseidon. Chapter 1, Son of Sparta. When the boy was born, like all Spartans he was inspected. If he'd been small or puny or sickly or misshapen, he would have been discarded. A head full of blonde hair, a strong grip, much stronger than a boy twice his age, and a glare that spoke death. His parents knew he would one day be a fierce warrior for Sparta. Thunder flashed in the skies above. The ground below trembled with his cries, and the ocean's tide raged with Poseidon's fury. Timaeus, the first son of the sea, was born. From the time he could stand at merely a week old, he was baptized in the fire of combat. He trained his body from a young age, something not many do. From the time he was only 2 and walk and talk he had trained. Push UPS. Sit UPS. No moment was wasted, each moment, each breath was like fire to the boy. He truly was destined for greatness. He swings his sword with ferocity and anger. His blade misses and he is backhanded by his father. He does not cry or shout in pain. He does not fall. He raises his blade and tries again. He does not retreat. Nor does he surrender. He is taught that death in battle for Sparta is the greatest glory he could achieve in his life. He looks upon his father and his shield with pride but does not smile. He does not show his emotions to anyone, other than his mother, to the only woman in his life. That is his gift. At age 7, as is custom, the boy is taken from his mother and plunged into a world of violence, manufactured by 300 years of Spartan warrior society, to create the finest soldiers the world has ever known. The agoge, as it's called, forces the boy to fight, to steal, and if necessary to kill. The boy was different. When he fought, he battered his opponents ruthlessly. When he stole, he did so blatantly, uncaring for who saw him, for who caught him. In Sparta the punishment for such a crime is flogging. The boy is tied to a post and beaten with a stick repeatedly until his flesh breaks. But he does not cry, he does waver in his strength. No, this punishment only further served to boost his power. The boy grits his teeth, hard, each strike against his back angering him further, until finally, by the shock and surprise of all of Sparta, the boy's arms crush the post in his grip. His roar is loud and thunderous, but not of pain, of anger. He breaks free from his imprisonment and faces his warden, and attacks. The Spartan is caught off guard by the boy's strength, unparalleled by most. The boy slams his fist into the Spartan's jaw, forcing him to the ground. He is beat upon by more Spartans. They grab the boy. He is punished in a different way, stripped of his clothing and forced into the wild. Orders from the king himself. 14 days, 2 weeks. He is to survive alone and unaided for this long. The boy does not cry or fear his punishment. Instead, he nods and walks. Before he leaves, he points to one of the young daughters of Sparta. Her skin a beautiful bronze shade, her eyes bluer than any ocean and her hair black. Hippolyta is her name. I will return from this challenge, he spoke, his voice full of authority and power, yet soft and elegant. And I will make you my bride, he decrees. The girl's father draws his sword and the girl's mother smiles. The girl herself is impressed. The boy has shown strength only expected from a full Spartan man. He has promise. With his declaration finished, Timaeus walks away from the village on his own and ventures out into the world. To be the best Spartan he can be. That is his goal. To serve Sparta, that is his dream. And he will see it through, no matter the cost. For 14 long days, he thrives. He kills, man and beast alike. He does not turn his back to an enemy, no matter how many they stand. The lion stalks the boy, from afar. But he is not as stealthy as he believes. Eyes as white as a star. Teeth as sharp as Poseidon's trident. Claws like iron. Fur as golden as Zeus's thunder. The boy faces the beast, his spear ready. It is not fear that gripes him, only a heightened sense of things. The cold air in his lungs, the freezing snow on his body. Timaeus grips his spear, heavily, his hands strong, his stance firm. He waits his prey. The beast charges, mane flaring, and teeth bared. Timaeus meets the beast head on, and in one swift motion, jams his spear into the beast's gullet and splits him open. Cut in twain, the beast bleeds out. Timaeus has won. He takes his spoils of war, the teeth ripped from the beast's jaws, his skin removed and turned into a cape. The time has finally arrived for the boy to return home, to us. A Spartan Timaeus? Ohu, ohu, ohu. Unprecedented. The Spartan king awaits the boy's return, along with his son, the newly returned Leonidas. Our king Leonidas? Ohu, ohu, ohu. The boy kneels to his king, the prize of his victory wrapped around his body. The king nods and demands the boy stand before his son, Leonidas, and orders him to bow. The boy does not. Instead, he removes his pelt and strikes Leonidas, hard and fast. Leonidas returns the blow. The fight has begun. Leonidas and Timaeus battled each other for 4 long hours. The sands of Sparta soaked in their blood. Neither wants to submit. Timaeus refuses to serve a weak king. Leonidas refuses to bend a knee to anyone in battle. All of Sparta watches this battle with intent. Would our king fall to one of his subjects, or would the king be worthy? That is what most thought. Upon the 4th and final hour, the battle ends. In a bold move, Leonidas manages to discard Timaeus' spear and forces his own blade towards the boy's throat. Yield, Leonidas demands. The fight hasn't left the boy's eyes. No, but it is replaced by something else. Respect. I swear to serve as your spear until the end of my life. I accept you, Leonidas, as my king. The boy spoke. He does not bow his head. He bows to no one. but instead, he reaches out his hand. And I shall serve as your king until the end of my life. My friend. The fight is over. All of Sparta rejoices. Timaeus has lost, but in lost he has gained a victory no other shall share. He stands to his feet, blood and sweat trickling from every part of his body. He marches to his goal, his destiny, his future wife, Hippolyta. There he stands before her, his pelt in one hand and in the other a necklace adorned by the beast's large teeth. She accepts these gifts with pride and Timaeus snatches her from her home. If any of you feel brave enough to take her from me, then by all means try. But know that no matter who you are, be her friend, her mother, or her father, I will kill you. The boy's threat is bold and his attitude cold and ruthless. The father, once ready to kill the boy, grins, and stands aside. All of Sparta relents. In time Leonidas and Timaeus grow, they train together and in time along with Artemis, they fight together. Their names become synonymous with victory. The left arm and shield of Sparta, Captain Artemis. The right arm and sword of Sparta, Captain Timaeus. The head and king of all of Sparta, Leonidas. Now the time has come to put their legendary names to the test, as a foe unlike any before approaches. His army's massive. His name feared in nearly every corner of the world, except in Sparta, Xerxes. Chapter 2, Preparations. Bright days, Leonidas? I asked. I reached up and brushed a piece of my golden locks out of my face as it was becoming annoying. Timaeus. Though I feel as if death is looming over us. Leonidas replied. Isn't it always? I replied. I knew very well what it meant to be a Spartan, as did Leonidas. Maybe so, but today feels differently than any other, my friend. Leonidas replied. I could sense the unease radiating off of him. So, I knew he was being serious. What could I was going to ask when Artemis came running up to us. My king, Persians are at our front gates. Artemis spoke. He was winded. He must have run all the way here. I looked to my king and nodded. I knew at that moment what he was thinking. And I suppose so did Artemis. We three had always been close. Ever since we fought our first battle together. Come, let's give our guests a warm Spartan welcome. Leonidas spoke. I smirked and finished the wine in my hand, and along with my king and Artemis, we made our way to greet the Persians. We walked, not ran, to the center of our great city. When we arrived, we were met by a dark one. His skin as black as coal, and jewelry adorning most of his face. But most importantly, at his waist were the severed heads and crowns of former kings. An insult to all of Sparta, one he will pay for dearly if he doesn't watch himself. Beside him were his guards, the Persians, covered themselves from head to toe in garbs. The fools, that much clothing slows your movement and hinders your sight. Off to the side I could see my beautiful wife Hippolyta and Queen Gorgo speaking to one another. It wasn't odd to find the two women together. Our families have always been close. The messenger steps down from his horse, as does the Persians, and walks towards us. Before you speak Persian, know that in Sparta everyone, even a king's messenger, is held accountable for the words of his voice. Leonidas spoke. His words weren't a warning, so much so a very direct threat for this man to choose his words carefully unless he wants to find out why we Spartans are the mightiest warriors to ever exist. Now, what message do you bring? Leonidas asked. The dark man bowed his head and spoke. Earth and water, he said. Queen Gorgo, who now stood beside Leonidas, smirked, as did the king. My wife was beside me as well, and I could tell she wanted to laugh at this poor idiot. You walked all the way from Persia for earth and water? Leonidas asked. Do not be coy or stupid, Persian. Queen Gorgo spoke. You can afford neither in Sparta. Hippolyta spoke as well. The two women were more than confident in making fun of the man. I always loved that about my wife. She was strong and bold and brave. Braver than most women. She was not afraid to speak her mind even amongst men. This is something the Persians did not share. What makes these women think they can speak amongst men? The Dark One asked. I wanted to cut the man's head from his body right then and there for speaking down to my wife. But I held back. For now, anyway. Because only Spartan women give birth to real men. Queen Gorgo told the man defiantly. Let us walk. Leonidas spoke. To cool our tongues. I nodded and began to follow, but not without giving my wife a look of pride. Artemis, Stelios, Dinocales, and myself as well as a few other Spartans followed behind King Leonidas as he and the messenger from Xerxes spoke. If you value your lives over your complete annihilation, listen carefully, Leonidas. The man has already made one mistake. Lord Xerxes conquers and controls everything he sets his eyes upon. He leads an army so massive it shakes the ground with its march. So vast it drinks the rivers dry. All the god King Xerxes requires is this. A simple offering of earth and water. The messenger spoke. We continued our walk through the streets of Sparta, and as we did, I felt the urge to skewer this man on my sword growing with each word he spoke. A token of submission to the will of Xerxes. At this declaration, Leonidas came to a stop, as did the rest of us Spartans. Submission. A word forbidden in Sparta unless it was used by our enemies as a means to surrender themselves. A word we do not take lightly when used against us as threat. Submission. Leonidas asked. Now that's a bit of a problem. See, the word is the Athenians have already turned you down. And if those philosophers and boy lovers have found that kind of nerve as Leonidas spoke, Theron, the worm for Usia, approached him. We must be diplomatic. Theron spoke. And of course, Spartans. Leonidas said to Theron threateningly. He then turned back to the Persian and spoke. Have a reputation to uphold. Choose your next words carefully, Leonidas. They may be your last as king, the Persian threatened. I could see it on all the faces of my brothers and sisters. We all wanted the same thing. To kill these Malakas. Leonidas turned towards us and stared at us. Not just those present but at all of Sparta, our sons and fathers. Our mothers, wives, and daughters. All of us. He looks to me and Artemis, we nod. He looks to his queen, as does she. The wind blowing past our faces. I knew what my king was thinking. We all did. And we were ready. Earth and water. Leonidas mumbles. Leonidas reaches for his blade and pulls it out, thrusting it towards the messenger. The Persians try to defend themselves, but before any of them can, we Spartans already have our blades on them. The Persian in front of me stares at me, his eyes wide and full of fear. I give him nothing but a cold and deadly glare. They were dead. They just didn't know it yet. Madman. You're a madman, the Persian declared. Earth and water. Oh, you will find plenty of that down there. Leonidas spoke as he gestured to our dead well. No one, no man, Persian or Greek threatens a messenger, the Dark One declared. He obviously did not hear my king's threat from before. If he did, he would have known being a messenger will not save you here. You bring the severed heads and crowns of dead kings to my city steps. You insult my queen. You threaten my people with slavery and death. Oh, I've chosen my words carefully, Persian. Perhaps you should have done the same. Leonidas told the man. This is blasphemy? This is madness. The Dark One spoke. Leonidas turned away and stared at his wife. The silence filled the air with tension as both sides prepared for what was to come. Leonidas then turned back to the man and smirked. Madness? This? Is? Sparta. He kicked the man in his chest and knocked him into the well. Yar. I drove my blade into the Persian's throat and drove him into the well. We Spartans killed and slaughtered the soldiers in our city without hesitation and threw their dead or dying bodies down into the well with the messenger. Ohu. I raised my blade to sky and roared in victory. Ohu, ohu, ohu. A resounding battle cry erupted in the streets of Sparta. Persian dogs. Threaten my family and you die. I spoke. You were waiting for that, weren't you, Timaeus? Artemis asked as he playfully smacked me on the back. You know me, Artemis. I wanted to gut that pig as soon as he set foot in Sparta, I told the man. Well, done you too. Leonidas spoke as he approached us. What are your orders, Leonidas? Artemis asked. Prepare yourselves, my friends. I want you both to prepare for war. I will devise of a plan tonight and will meet you both tomorrow. Leonidas spoke. Yes, my king. I replied. I must tend to some things at home. I will meet you as soon as I am finished. I told Artemis. Of course. Prepare yourself, Timaeus. By this time tomorrow we will be gearing for war. Artemis spoke. He and I shook arms, and then I departed. I found my wife amongst the crowd and approached her. That was excellent, my love. She told me. I am glad you liked it, my love. Come, let us make for home. I wish to see the kids. I told Hippolyta. She nodded and we walked back to our home in Sparta. In public it was seen as weakness to show love. But once we were safely inside our own home, I gladly took my wife into my arms and kissed her fiercely. When we broke for air, Hippolyta giggled. What has gotten into you? Hippolyta asked. War, my love. War has gotten into me. This time tomorrow, Artemis, Leonidas, and I will be planning to go to war against Xerxes. And until then I will spend every aching moment with my beautiful wife. I replied. I remember the first night we made love. She took my breath away. Father. I turned my head and saw Jason, my son, running towards me with his knife. He jumped at me and tried to cut me. I smiled and grabbed the boy's small arm and twisted it behind his back. He was only 6 years old and already showed promise. I was proud of him. Jason, my son, your thrust is strong, but you are still off balance. Control yourself, boy. I told my son. I let his arm go and placed my hand on his shoulder strongly. Yes, father. I felt a tug on my cape. I looked down and saw that my daughter had snuck up behind me. The gods know the girl is a quiet one. If this were a battle, she'd have taken my back. Diana, my little princess. I grabbed my daughter and lifted her up into my arms and kissed her on the forehead. She smiled and hugged me tightly. Her strength no less than her brother's. Okay, down now, princess. Mom and dad have something important to talk about. You and your brother go wash up and prepare for dinner. I told the little girl. Yes, father. Diana replied. She hopped down from my arms and dragged her little brother out of the room. They're precious. I spoke. They are our children. Your children. Of course, they are. Hippolyta replied as she wrapped her strong arms around my stomach. My wife. My love. I will not lie to you. This is going to be a hard battle. Even for us. But I promise, by the end of it, Sparta and all of Greece will be free from Xerxes' terror. I spoke. I believe you, my love. Come. Dinner will be finished soon. While the children are out, let us spend some alone time together. Hippolyta whispered in my ear. I smiled and turned around. I wrapped my arms around Hippolyta's waist and kissed her softly on her neck, taking my time to suck on her beating pulse. I felt her wrap her arms around my neck and moan into my ear. I reached down and squeezed her soft ass. Take me, my love. I want you to take me right here. Hippolyta spoke. Her voice as enchanting as Circe. Her breath warm and pleasant. I pushed Hippolyta up against the wall of our home and lifted her dress. I pulled my already erect penis out and quickly drove it into her. Her vagina was tight, despite giving birth to 2 children, it was tight and warm. Being connected like this felt better than anything else this world could offer. I thrust it into her hard and fast, as she liked it. I could feel her nails digging into my back. Her moans of pleasure in my ear only furthering my own beating heart. My love. Yes. I felt her walls constrict around me. A torrent of fluid spilled onto my lap. The feeling was more than enough to force me over the edge. I ejaculated inside of her tight walls. Breathless, we both collapsed to the ground. Her arms and legs still wrapped tightly around me. My love. That was amazing. You're always amazing, my love. I told Hippolyta. I leaned back and kissed her gently on her lips and smiled. My family were the only ones who would see this side of me. The only ones who would know of it. Come love, the kids will be back any moment now, Hippolyta told me. I nodded and we both hurried to fix ourselves. Once the kids returned, we had dinner. Once finished, I kissed my family goodbye and headed to meet Artemis to prepare ourselves for war. Where is Leonidas? I asked as I shined my armor. He has gone to meet with the oracle and the ephors to tell them of his plan. Artemis replied. What is his plan? I asked. He wants to huddle them all together in the hot gates. Use the tight passage to take away their numbers advantage. A smart move, especially with the sheer number of Xerxes' forces. It could work. I replied. I think the same. Let's just hope the ephors agree with the idea. Artemis replied. The men are ready. I spoke. And the equipment is all in good shape. I think we're ready. What do you think? I asked Artemis. He was just as skilled as I was. In all of Sparta only 2 men have ever provided me a challenge in battle. Leonidas and Artemis. So, his opinion carried weight with me. I think we can do it. But we shouldn't lose our composure and get arrogant. Artemis replied. Agreed. He and I sat there sharpening our blades and spears and making sure our shields were strong. After a good while we returned home to rest for tomorrow. We marched. Chapter 3. We march. Word has come back, and it is not as we had hoped. The oracle and the ephors have spoken. Sparta's army cannot march. We cannot battle Xerxes. As an army we can't. So, my king has given us a specific order. Artemis and I have been ordered to choose 300 of our best warriors to march with him to the hot gates. And so, we did. Here I stand, getting ready to leave to join my brothers in battle. I gather my sword, my spear, and my shield and prepare to leave. Since we have been forbidden to go to war, I cannot bring my armor, only the clothes on my back. I walk from my bedroom to the front door to see my family waiting for me. My son stands proud, his head high and chest out. He's the man now. My daughter, her tears are strong, but the pride I feel for her, the love I have for her, is far stronger. And standing at the front is my wife, her beautiful ocean orbs staring into my own. Her face is stoic and proud, but I can feel her pain. I can see her fighting back the tears. Spartan, my love, come back to us with your shield, or on it, she said to me. She reached up and took the necklace I gave to her all those years ago and placed it around my neck. The many sharp teeth of the lion, and the beautiful gems she toiled to find. Our symbol of love. My daughter pulls on my arm. She places a beautiful bracelet in my hands. I kiss her softly on her forehead and wipe away the tears. I probably won't see you again, my princess. But no, I love you. I don't say. I don't need to. She knows. I hope she knows. I turn back to my wife. I stare at her, my face hardened in preparation for the battle to come. I don't say a word to her. How could I? Only the strong and brave may call themselves Spartans. Only the strong. Only the brave. I reached down and give to my son the lion pelt that I made all those years ago. He looked up at me and beats on his chest proudly. I know it hurts my son. But tomorrow will be a brighter day. Not just for Sparta, but for all of Greece. I walked outside and the first thing I saw were all of my brothers and their families gathered. Spartans? Ohu, 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 ohu. This wasn't my brothers. These were our mothers, our sisters, our wives, our daughters, my wife, my daughter. Move out. I raise my spear and shout to my brothers. We don't say a word, but each of us knows that deep within our hearts, we love our families. And so, we march to meet our king. Our feet marching to the sound of our family's chants. None of us looking back. Only forward. Forward to the future. Outside the gates of Sparta, we meet our king. Leonidas. Captains. My king. Artemis and I reply. Is this all of them? Leonidas asked. 300, as you ordered. All of them with sons to carry on their name. Artemis replied. Leonidas looked at Dilios and nodded. He then began moving on to the next Spartans. We are with you, sire. For Sparta. For freedom. To the death. Stelios shouted. I smirked at my old friend. He was braver than most. And definitely the most battle-crazed fiend of us all. Leonidas smirked as well. Proud of his soldiers' fearlessness. We continued on inspecting the troops until we came across a young one. One of Artemis' boys. He is your son. But he is too young to have felt a woman's warmth. Leonidas spoke. Are you sure, Artemis? I asked. I too was concerned for the boy. This wasn't a battle many of us were expecting to come back from. And in Sparta not leaving behind a son could be a sign of shame in some cases. I have others to replace him. Artemis spoke. Astinos is as brave as any. No younger than we were the first time we all stood next to each other in battle. Artemis spoke. I patted the man on his back. I had nothing else to say. You are a good friend. But a better captain? There is none. Leonidas spoke. I resent that, Leonidas. I spoke plainly. Don't. Amongst my army, none have the skill and strength with a blade that you do. Leonidas replied. I smirked and slapped my spear across my shield. My good king, my good king. We turned to see that members of the council were approaching us. My good king, the oracle has spoken. The ephors have spoken. There must be no march. They spoke. 'Tis the law, my lord. The Spartan army must not go to war. Theron spoke. Nor shall it. I've issued no such orders. I'm here, just taking a stroll. Stretching my legs. These 300 men are my personal bodyguard. Our army will stay in Sparta. Leonidas spoke. And where will you go? Theron asked. I haven't really thought about it. But now that you ask, I think I'll head north. Leonidas replied. The hot gates. Theron replied. I stared at the council men as they looked to each other for an answer coldly. I despised these cowards more than any. They are a disgrace to the name Sparta. Move out. Artemis shouted to our brave 300. What shall we do? One of the council men asked. What can we do? Theron replied. What can you do? Leonidas asked. I looked at Theron and grabbed the hilt of my sword. I think the message is loud and clear. I then turned and marched to join my brothers, making my way all the way to the front alongside Artemis as we began our march. As I did, Leonidas stood behind and spoke with his wife. Spartan, come back with your shield. Or on it. Gorgo spoke. He doesn't say a word. None of us do. He simply marches. As we marched, we were bestowed upon a sight like no other. Our families and our brothers forced to stay behind seeing us off. None of us look, none of us say a word. For only the strong and the brave may call themselves Spartans. Only the strong, only the brave. Our allos is played loud and strong, signaling the beginning of our fight. We march. For our lanes. For our families. For our freedoms. We march. Chapter 4, The Hot Gates. The battle begins? For hours we marched, without rest, without worry, without mercy. We march until we came upon an eager group of Greek Daxos. What a pleasant surprise. Leonidas spoke. This morning is full of surprises, Leonidas. Daxos replied. This isn't an army. We were tricked. Could only be a few hundred of them. This is a surprise. The whispers and murmuring of the Greek rang clear. Silence. Daxos commanded. We heard Sparta was on the warpath, and we were eager to join forces. Daxos explained to Leonidas. If it is blood you seek, then you are welcome to join us. Leonidas told the man. But you bring only this handful of men to face Xerxes. I see I was wrong to expect Sparta's commitment to at least match our own. Daxos stated. I was offended by his words. We all were. No one has invested more into this than the Spartans. But we don't say a word. Our king speaks for us. Doesn't it? You there. Leonidas speaks as he pointed to the youngest looking man in front of him. What is your profession? He asked. Well, I'm a potter, sir. The man replied. And you, Acadion? What is your profession? He asked. Sculptor, sir. The man replied. And you? He asked the last man. Blacksmith. He stated. At least the man was familiar with a blade. Maybe he wouldn't be dead weight. Leonidas then turned to us. Spartans? What is your profession? Leonidas asked. We raised and shouted to the heavens. Ohu, ohu, ohu. Our roars so loud the very ground below us shakes. Our voices carried through the plains like Zeus' thunder. Heh. See, old friend? I brought more soldiers than you did. Leonidas told the man. The Greeks utter not another word. Instead, they fall in line behind us and join our march. For hours we move. Through the sun and into the dark of night, we marched. There is no rest. Not tonight. We're being followed. Astynos spoke. Artemis, Leonidas, and I approached Astynos and saw what he was speaking of. A creature, wearing the robes of a Spartan. It has followed us since Sparta. Leonidas spoke. Maybe, it wishes to join us in battle. I spoke. Unsure of the creature's intent. Maybe it wished to catch us off guard and attack. Or maybe it wished to join us. Either way, as long as it stayed at bay, then there's nothing to be concerned of. My lord. Stelios shouted. The three of us turned towards the man and off in the distance, we saw the burning cloud of smoke and fire. What in the 9 gates of Tartarus? I asked. We shall find out. Come on. Leonidas ordered. We all marched towards the fire, burning ash filling our lungs, the heavy stench of blood, urine, and feces filling our nostrils. And yet we found none of the villagers. What happened here? Stelios asked. Where are the villagers? I can only guess. A Persian scouting party, numbering in the 20s most likely. I told the man. I leaned down and placed my hand in the dirt where a footprint was. It was weird and misshapen. Unlike any foot I'd seen before. These footprints are weird. Asterisk crash. Asterisk a nearby pot shelf suddenly crashed and we all raised our shields and spears. Call us jumpy. At least we were ready for anything. Once we realized it was clear we relaxed a little. And then came the shout. Behind us. We didn't care who said it. We all turned our backs and raised our shields and spears once again, ready to face whoever was brave enough to come at us. A large shadow loomed in the smoke, but instead of a monster or Persian coming at us, it was a child. Child. I shouted. Everyone quickly relaxed once again as the boy approaching was no threat. In fact, he was our only source of information. The boy marched through our forces right up to Leonidas and collapsed. A brave boy, strong and courageous to have survived this long. He would have made an excellent Spartan. It's quiet now. They came with beasts from the blackness. With their claws and fangs, they grabbed them. Everyone, but me. The boy spoke. He then shut his eyes for the last time and died. The villagers. I found them. Timaeus shouted. We all walked towards the man, and as we approached, we felt our stomachs churn. The sight before us was like none before. Vile, repulsive, angering. Have the gods no mercy? Timaeus asked. We are doomed. Timaeus stated. Quiet yourself. Artemis ordered angrily. There will be blood for this. I spoke boldly. My anger reaching levels I haven't felt in all my life. The child speaks of the Persian ghosts, known through the ancient times. They are the hunters of men's souls. They cannot be killed or defeated. Not this darkness. Not these immortals. Timaeus explained. Immortals. Leonidas spoke. I stepped towards the men myself. We will put their name to the test. I decreed. As we all looked upon the tree of human beings stabbed together with spears and swords, the vile desecration of our citizens sending a burning fury through all of our hearts, we march now with a purpose, much stronger than we were before. The sight lets us know what awaits our families if we fail. Into the hot gates we march. Into that narrow corridor we march, where Xerxes' numbers count for nothing. Spartans, citizens, soldiers, freed slaves, brave Greeks all, brothers, fathers, sons. We march. For honor's sake. For duty's sake. For glory's sake. We march. Look, Persians. Astinos shouts. I smirk at the boy's enthusiasm. If anything, he has the right attitude. Timaeus pats the boy on the back and pushes him forward. Astinos goes happily, as do the rest of us. Right into the gates of hell we march. Out into the sea we spot Xerxes' men in their ships. Ah, their ships. Like twigs in the seas, unaware of the coming storm. Let's watch these motherless dogs as they're embraced by the loving arms of Greece herself. Come. Timaeus spoke. He has a way with words. Doesn't her Artemis? I asked. Yes. Come, let's see how these dogs handled Poseidon's storms and Zeus' thunder. Artemis spoke. True. It does look like rain. Leonidas spoke. The night comes swiftly, as does the storm. Zeus stabs the sky with thunderbolts and Poseidon batters their ships with a raging storm. Tidal waves sink the ships into. The gods and we Spartans welcome the Persians to Greece with open arms. Prepare yourselves, dogs, for this is but one part of the mighty Greece. We have much worse in store for you cowards. We Spartans celebrate in our own way. Artemis and the others beat on their chests and scream. I stare down at the crashing ships and grin, as my old friend, the ocean itself, smashes my enemies apart and dances with the beat of my own heart. Only one of us truly keeps his Spartan reserve. Only our king. Once the storms die down, our king issues an order. Timaeus, Artemis, Timaeus, Timaeus. You four, I want you to go out on a scouting run. See how many they number and report back to me. Leonidas spoke. It will be done, my lord. Timaeus replied. I nodded as well as did Artemis, and we all quickly left to complete our mission. We left behind our spears and shields, leaving us with nothing to defend ourselves with but our swords. We climbed up and over the cliffs, our crimson capes fluttering behind us. We looked out and saw thousands of Xerxes' men camped out. The ground was covered in Persian steel. Nothing could be seen. It was a truly fearsome sight to behold. They call themselves the greatest army in all of Asia. Well, this isn't Asia. I saw those ships smash on the rocks. How can this be? Timaeus asked. We saw but a fraction of the monster known as Xerxes' army. I spoke. There can be no victory here. Timaeus replied. Timaeus looked at Timaeus and questioned the man's sanity over his large grin. He then looked Artemis and I and swore we were crazy. Why do you smile? Timaeus asked us. Arcadian. I've fought countless times. Yet I've never met an adversary who can offer what we Spartans call a beautiful death. Timaeus told the man. I can only hope, with all the world's warriors gathered against us, there can be one down there who's up to the task. Timaeus explained to the man. Timaeus looked back and forth between the three of us, each of us smiling in anticipation, and he shook his head. His reaction only caused us to grin more. He ha 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 ha. Timaeus and I laughed in unison. The time was coming soon, for the Persians to meet their gods. With the mission complete, we returned to Leonidas and informed him of the situation. The odds we face are enormous, but we will not falter. The king has an idea, and I must say I appreciate it very much. The next day, we put our plan into motion. We get to work in the hot sun. We fetch the bodies of the dead Persians, who fell during the night, and we build a wall, a blockade if you will, something to show the Persians that too can play their game. For hours during the day, we build, sweat pouring down our bodies, our arms toiling away at building the wall. March. The sound of whips can be heard in the distance. It must be the Persians. I hope they like the gifts we left for them. Forward I say. Crack, the sound of a whip beats again. Stop. The man shouted. We continued moving bodies and turned towards the man as we did. His slaves scarred and his warriors flimsy. Obviously, a scouting party. A pretty weak one at that. Who commands here? The man asked. I am the emissary to the ruler of all the world, the god of gods, King Xerxes. And by that authority, I demand that someone show me your commander. The Persian ordered. We ignored the man's ghastly prattling and winded expressions. I picked up my sword and drew it from its sheath, as did Stelios. I gave the man a look and he nodded. Listen, do you think the poultry number you slew scares us? These hills swarm with our scouts. And do you think your pathetic wall will do anything except fall like a heap of dry leaves in haste of? His silence tells me he's finally caught on to what we were making the wall out of. See something you like, Persian? I asked. You know, our ancestors built this wall, using ancient stones from Greece herself, and with a little Spartan help. Your Persian scouts supplied the mortar, Stelios told the man. I smirked and started moving towards the side of the Persians. During their anger, they were blind to see all of us surrounding them. You will pay for your barbarism, the Persian shouted. He reeled back and was ready to crack Stelios with his whip. Stelios ran forward and used a rock to fling himself forward. He brought his sword up and just as the Persian was going to hit him, Stelios cut his arm off. Slaughter them, I shouted. The Persians who were caught off guard were suddenly drawn back to reality just in time to see our swords coming at them. I drove my blade into the Persian archer's neck and tore his head off with ease. The next one came running at me shouting. I swung my blade up and blocked his sword strike. I spun on my heel and drove my blade into his back before pulling it out and throwing into the face of the next one to step towards me. I rolled along the ground and pulled my sword out of his face. I then stood back up and cut the legs off the slave carrying the Persian emissary. Once he fell, the rest lost their hold on the grand chariot they were carrying and were all crushed underneath it. My arm. The Persian emissary shouted in pain. It's not yours anymore, Stelios told the man. Go now. Run along and tell your Xerxes he faces free men here, not slaves. Do it quickly, before we decide to make our wall just a little bit bigger. No, not slaves. Your women will be slaves. Your sons and daughters. Your elders will be slaves. But not you. No, by noon this day you will be dead men. 1,000 nations of the Persian Empire descend upon you, the Persian declared. I could see the faintest smile growing on Stelios' face. The man's been looking forward to this all night. Our arrows will blot out the sun, the Persian spoke. Then we will fight in the shade, Stelios answered. Ha 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 ha, I laughed. It was a cold and startling one. I could see the look of absolute terror on the Persian's face. His confusion was apparent. Run along now, little Persian, or I'll kill you, I told the man. But the arm stays. The man got to his feet and ran as fast as he could while bleeding out. And we all laughed. Nice going, Stelios, I told the man. Thank you, Timaeus, Stelios spoke. Handle things here, my friend. I must go and speak with Leonidas, I told the man. Yes, sir, Stelios replied. I nodded and turned to gather my things. I strapped on my cape and grabbed my shield and spear, and walked up the cliff. Along the way, I ran into Artemis, who seemed a little miffed. What is wrong, Artemis? I asked. Leonidas is speaking with the monster that has been following us, Artemis replied. And he speaks of an old goat path that leads behind the gates. It believes the Persians could use it to flank us, Artemis explained. It would be smart. Then this monster is our ally. So, why are you so mad? I asked. Sorry, still a little on edge, Artemis replied. We shouldn't be trusting strangers. I can understand your sentiment, old friend, but don't let it cloud your vision. We can use every bit of information we can, and in this case, this was a valuable piece of knowledge we've gained. From a monster or not, I explained to the man. You are right, Timaeus, Artemis spoke. Don't worry about it too much, my friend. We have a battle to look forward to, and it would appear our king has returned, I spoke. I then pointed to Leonidas as he descended the cliff's many rocks. My king, Artemis spoke. Dispatch the Phoenicians to the goat path, and pray to the gods that no one tells them about it, Leonidas ordered. Right, I spoke. The ground then started to rumble and the rocks around us shook. Artemis looked up and observed the formations around us. Earthquake, Artemis spoke. No, Captain, Leonidas told the man. A large grin adorned his face. Battle formations, I spoke. Ha 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 ha, I laughed. Leonidas, Artemis, and I all ran down the cliff towards the rest of the men. Everyone, prepare for battle, I shouted. Oh-huh. The men all gathered their gear, and laced up for battle. The Arcadians and other Greeks had already hidden themselves in a path along the cliffs, meaning right now this fight was ours and ours alone. We stood in the center of the gates, our helmets on, our shields strapped, and our spears primed. Together in our phalanx formation we waited. The sounds of war drums and horns blared in the distance as the massive Persian army approached. Leonidas, Artemis, and I stood in the front and center. The Persians would not touch one of our soldiers without going through us first. This is where we hold them, this is where we fight, this is where they die, Leonidas exclaimed. Earn these shields, boys, Artemis declared. Oh-huh. The entirety of our squadron raised their shields and chanted, ready for battle. Our screams shook the valley and reached all the way to the Persians in seconds. Bloody your spears, boys. I raised my spear and shouted. Oh-huh. This time the Spartans raised their spears, their blades ready. Remember this day, men, for it will be yours for all time, Leonidas declared. The Persians stood in front of us, made way for a Persian on horseback. Spartans, lay down your weapons, the Persian dog commanded. Stelios, in his crazy glory, threw his spear with such intensity and such precision that it rippled through air until it landed firmly in the Persian's chest. Persians, being one of the captains of the Spartan army, I shouted to the enemy. Every man beside me raised their shields and spears towards the enemy, even the king, on my command. Come and get them, I shouted. War drums banged and horns blew loud. Ah! The Persians roared as they charged us. Give to them nothing, but take from them everything, Leonidas exclaimed. We stood ready, our eyes focused on one thing, the enemy. Our thoughts on nothing but the enemy. Our shields strong, our spears firm, and tied around my hand, the necklace my daughter made for me. Steady, boys, hold. Artemis and I shouted to our soldiers. Ah! I shouted as I braced myself for the impact. The horde of Persians slammed into our bodies, their roars loud and long. The sound of metal banging against metal clattered through the valley. Ah! Cowards, I shouted as I pushed back against the men trying to skewer me. Parisian dogs, Leonidas roared. Cowards, Artemis shouted. Is that the best you can do? Arg! Stelios bellowed. Our feet dug into the ground below us as we were pushed back, but the Persians miscalculated. The further back we moved, the slower we moved. Push, 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 I shouted. Ah! Artemis roared in pain. One of the Persians had managed to slice his arm. I stabbed the man in his throat with my spear for daring to hurt my friend. We continued moving back until finally we halted. Now, I shouted. We pushed back against the Persians, pushing them off of our shields, and the slaughter began. We Spartans began skewering them on the ends of our spears. I stabbed the first man in front of me before pulling back and stabbing another. Once the first wave was dealt with, we stepped over them and used them as support. We stuck our shields out again and pushed against the Persians. We pushed them back once more. This time, however, Stelios got in my way and took my kills. Stelios shouted as he slashed blindly at the enemies in front of him, cutting them down without remorse. I grinned at his selfishness and covered him with my shield to protect him. We pushed back against the Persians again. This time Stelios and I shared a kill. He stabbed the man low in his stomach and I hit him in his throat. Stealing my kill, Stelios? I asked. He looked back at me and grinned. We repeated this process over and over. No prisoners, Artemis shouted. Oh, no mercy, I shouted as well. Oh, da. I shouted as I drove my spear into another man's throat. It was a hard target to hit for most, but I wasn't most. I didn't want to waste energy, so I went for the quick kills. Moving on to my next target before the last one hit the ground. The sands below were dyed scarlet from the amount of blood pouring over them. We slowly pushed our way up the valley. I moved forward and thrusted my spear into one man's throat. I used all my strength to rip it out the side, and I spun using my spear like a sword to behead the 3 men rushing me. I continued spinning, gaining enough force to throw my spear so hard it pierced through the 2 men running in behind them. I didn't have time to pull it out, so I drew my sword. I raised my shield and blocked the first strike sent at my head. I parried it with enough force to cause the man trying to hit me to fall on his back. I didn't give him time to recover. I thrusted my sword down into his throat and spun, protecting myself from oncoming danger while killing the man. I spun off my heel and used my shield to throttle the next man in front of me in his face. The moment my shield made contact, his skull split open and he dropped to the floor dead. I was strong, far stronger than most. The only person I had ever lost handily to was Leonidas, and they say his family was descended from Heracles. They say we all were. I believe it true, as I know no man who has ever withstood my spear, and none of you will today. I grabbed my spear from the bowels of the 2 men trapped on it and started stabbing and slashing any man brave enough to meet death. After recomposing myself and standing near my king and Artemis, we all glared at the remaining Persians in front of us. They look thirsty, Artemis spoke. So, let's give them something to drink, I declared. To the cliffs, Leonidas shouted. We raised our spears and slowly pushed the Persians towards the edges of the cliffs. We slowly stalked them, their fear boosting our morale, until finally, I struck. I drove my spear into the man's neck, and surely enough everyone else began falling to their deaths in the shallow, rocky waters below. Halt! Artemis bellowed. Hell of a good start, my brothers. Wouldn't you agree, Artemis? I asked the man. Artemis replied. He turned and faced the rest of the men and raised his spear. Oh, what is it, Leonidas? I asked my king. This is just the beginning, Timaeus. Don't get arrogant, Leonidas replied. I spoke. Leonidas turned towards the path on the other side of the pass, as did the rest of us. We heard a strange noise like whistles in the wind, and suddenly from across the plains the sky turned black and small objects hurtled towards us. Arrows, Tucktail, Artemis shouted. We all dropped our spears and hid behind our shields. The hammering of arrows against our shields filled the valley. Persian cowards, Leonidas cursed. As I waited, I heard the sound of laughing and looked ahead of myself to see Astinos, Artemis' boy, laughing. What the hell are you laughing at? Stelios asked. Well, you had to say it, Astinos replied. Say what? I asked. Fight in the shade. Ha ha ha. Astinos laughed. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Stelios and I both joined the boy in laughter, and we continued to do so until the final arrow landed and there was quiet among the skies once more. After a few moments and we were sure there was no more danger, we recovered. Recover, Artemis shouted. I raised my spear and shattered each arrow embedded in my shield. I then followed behind Leonidas as he ran down the path of the hot gates. When we got to the other side, we saw more of Xerxes' army coming towards us. Leonidas stopped and looked at all of us. Today no Spartan dies, Leonidas exclaimed. Oh. We regrouped into our phalanx once more and awaited the Persians. They came on horseback this time. As we waited, I noticed that Astinos was nervously looking at his father. Easy son, Artemis told the boy. No worries, Artemis. I have the boy. I told the man to ease his nerves. I stood beside Astinos, my shield ready to protect him if he needed it. Steady, boy, we've got your back. We stood ready as the Persians rushed us, and once they were close enough, I thrusted my spear into the first man's chest, forcing him off his horse and into another man behind him, bottling up their forces and forcing them to turn towards the swords and spears of my brothers. Astinos swallowed his courage and cut the legs out from under one of the horsemen, causing him to hit the floor and allowing me to finish him. Well done, boy, I told Astinos as I recovered my spear. The Persians tried to take us, but with their forces bottled up, they were nothing but lambs to the slaughter, and we do what we were trained to do, what we were born to do, bred to do. I raised my spear and jammed it into the throat of one of the Persians, his blood blinding the man behind him and further handicapping the incoming Persians. For hours we do this. For hours the Persians rush to their deaths. No prisoners, no mercy. It is a good start. The day ends and the sun begins to set. The hordes Xerxes sent our way has ended. For now, no. One of Persians pretending to be dead shouted in terror as I raised my spear. I shoved it straight into his mouth without hesitation, killing him on the spot. Our Greek comrades are begging for a crack at the Persians, sire. I told Leonidas. Good. Against something I think they can handle, Leonidas replied. Haha. I chuckled as I killed another Persian. You think they couldn't handle these dogs? I asked. I'm not saying that, Timaeus. Just don't want our little friends to get hurt is all, Leonidas said with a little laugh of his own. Tell Daxos, I want him and 20 of his best, eager and sober, ready for the next charge. Leonidas spoke. King Leonidas, Stelios exclaimed as he ran up to the three of us. He bent over, from exhaustion. He had been sent to spy on the Persian army, a long distance to run by himself. Stelios, catch your breath, boy, Leonidas told the man. Stelios took a deep breath and stood up straight. Yes, my lord. The Persians approaching. Small contingent. Too small for an attack, Stelios explained. A distraction, Artemis asked. Or perhaps, Xerxes wishes to parley. I wondered aloud. Maybe. Captains, I leave you gentlemen in charge, Leonidas spoke. Me and Artemis both nodded as we realized Leonidas would be journeying to meet them. Sire, Stelios spoke. Are you sure you don't want me to come with you, Leonidas? I asked. Relax. If they assassinate me, all of Sparta goes to war. Pray they are that stupid. Pray we are that lucky, Leonidas spoke. Ugh. I turned my head and saw one of the Persians struggling to move. I walked over to him and raised my spear. Besides, there's no reason we can't be civil, is there? Leonidas asked as he took a bite from his apple. Ha ha ha, civil right, I spoke. I then smiled down at the man below me and thrusted my spear into his neck. All right, boys, I have an idea. Gather the bodies. Tonight, we show Xerxes' horde what a real trap looks like. I looked to my soldiers and began planning for the night we were going to have would be like no other. Chapter 5, Immortals? Our wall has been built, our bait lane. Now, all that remains is to await our enemy. And yet sitting here staring out at the ocean, I feel at peace. I am worried, I know I am, but I do not feel it. Guess that's you watching my back, old friend. I have fought many battles on the seas, and I won all of them. Never in all my life have these waves failed me in my time of need. Don't fail me now. Timaeus, is something wrong? Leonidas asked me. He patted me on the shoulder and sat next to me as I stared out over the seas. No, Leonidas. Just thinking, I replied. About what, my friend? Leonidas asked. These seas, they have always had some kind of effect on me, as if being in them boosts my strength. I spoke. Good, we will need that strength. Leonidas spoke. But right now, all I feel is peace. And it angers me that these Persians are coming to ruin such a thing. It sickens me. How little these dogs, I told the man. Honestly, I wasn't one for senseless slaughter. That didn't mean I didn't enjoy battle. In fact, there are very few moments in my life where I feel truly alive. And that's when I'm with my family, swimming in these seas, and when I'm fighting. I can understand that, my friend. But that is why we fight. To put an end to their terror. Leonidas spoke. Yeah, come on. I'm sure the men are wondering where we are. Let's go see what our Persian guests have prepared for us. I spoke. I grabbed my gear and got to my feet and walked with Leonidas back to our front camp. Well into the night the sound of drums beating and footsteps approaching sounded throughout the valley. Leonidas was right. We waited for our enemies. Yes, our enemies. They served the dark will of Persian kings for 500 years. Eyes as dark as night. Teeth filed to fangs. They came in many different shapes and sizes. Creatures of the abyss. Monsters. Abominations. Soulless. One day to be known as mutants. The personal guard to King Xerxes himself. The Persian warrior elite. The deadliest fighting force in all of Asia. The Immortals. We sat quiet and waiting as our enemies approached, unaware of what awaits them. The God King has betrayed a fatal flaw. Hubris. Easy to taunt. Easy to trick. Before wounds and weariness have taken their toll, the Mad King throws the best he has at us. Xerxes has taken the bait. With our enemies close we attack? Spartans? Push! Leonidas exclaimed, his orders reaching every Spartan within the valley. We shouted loud as we pushed against the wall of Persian corpses, until they toppled over and crushed the immortals in front of us. It is time to put their names to the test. I grabbed my spear and ran over the pile of corpses. I drive my spear through the chest of the first immortal I lay eyes on. He drops to the ground, bleeding, dying, dead. We test these immortals. They fail. I pulled my spear out and swung it around my body into the face of the next one, decapitating him. Fight together, I shout. These immortals are relentless. They attack together. They die, but they do their best to take you with them. Artemis, you're back. I spotted an immortal trying to flank the captain. So, I shout his name in warning. Thankfully Astinos saves him before tragedy befalls him. The immortals, cut loose a creature. A beast the size of 2 men. He is grotesque and animalistic. My prey. With one swing of his sword, he smacks aside my Spartan brothers. He eyes me and charges. Come on, I shout. I grab my spear and charge the brute, cutting down the immortals that stand between me with ease. As I approach my target, I get a good speed and I leave my feet. Using one of the immortals as a springboard, I launch myself into the air. And with all the strength I have in my body, I launch my spear through the air. My target is hit. Right through its throat, my spear goes. But still he charges. I draw my sword as the mad beast approaches, his gnarly and nasty growling, reaching my ears and his foul breath burning my eyes. The beast raises its sword to strike down at me. I block it with my shield. His strike hard and fierce, but not enough to break me. I spin around with my sword and cut the tendons behind its legs. He grabs at it, but quicks moving forward. So, I strike again. I aim at his spine. I drive me sword into its back, and it gets stuck. I'm in trouble. I think fast. I raise my shield and smash it into the beast's back, pushing the blade further into the creature's back. The creature dropped to its knees. I pulled my spear out of its neck and quickly threw it into the oncoming immortal, trying to take my back. These immortals were quick, some of them harder than others to pierce through, but nonetheless we have proven they aren't so unbeatable as they think. Arcadians? Now, Leonidas shouts. The Arcadians finally join the battle, stabbing and slashing wildly. More brutes than warriors. They make a mess of things. Brave amateurs. They do their part. They give us a moment to recover ourselves. Are you all right, Leonidas? I asked the man as I regrouped with the rest of the Spartans. I should be asking you that, Captain. Leonidas spoke. These beasts haven't lived up to their names yet. Come, let's show the Arcadians how it's done. We raised our shields and spears and charged the Persians together. Our combined might too much for the immortals to overcome. They charge us and slam their bodies into our shields. I raise my spear and stab them as they approach. So easily they fall, not living up to their titles. We stand firm. We stand brave. We stand victorious. The immortals have failed our test. And a man who fancies himself a god feels a very human chill crawl up his spine. We pile the bodies of our enemies high, once again. This tactic won't serve as bait again, but it will be a warning, a sign of what's to come, and a deterrent for those smart enough to turn away, lest they suffer our spears. Once our task is done and our victory secured, we return to camp. It's time to celebrate. To our king, Artemis exclaimed. Oh, and our honored dead. Oh, I shouted. Oh, who does Xerxes dare to send next? Who? Stelios, his loud mouth. But I share his optimism. There's nothing that can stop us now. Oh. I looked around as my brothers celebrated. Our victory was hard-earned, and our brothers lost, went out in glory. Everything a Spartan could ask for. Yet our king did not celebrate with us. I dropped my flask and made way to Leonidas' side. Dark nights, Leonidas. I asked the man. Oh, can you feel it, Timaeus? Can you hear it? Against Asia's endless hordes, we have a chance. A small chance to obtain more than glory. A chance of victory. Leonidas spoke. We can hold the hot gates. We can win. I spoke. A small glimpse of victory sparked in my mind. Maybe, just maybe I would find my family once again. Chapter 6, the last line. The morning rises and we Spartans are once again girded for war. We get up before the sun rises and eat hearty. It isn't long until the pounding of drums and the stomping of feet fill the valleys, as Xerxes' men rush towards us once again. The barbarians howler. Those the back yell forward as they whip their men. Those unfortunate bastards up front scream back. But it is too late. My spear is already firmly planted into his spine. Hey, you gutless cowards. Don't run. Meet your maker, I shouted. Having fun, old man? Astinos asked me as he joined my side on the field. You're still wet behind the ears, boy. You haven't earned the right to call me old just yet. Not yet, I replied. I thrusted my spear high into the air and slammed it down on top of the approaching Persian. His body split in twain from the force of my strike. The kid has a point. Stelios spoke. He jumped in front of me and cut the head off of the Persian I was preparing to strike. You are kind of old now. You're moving so much slower. Perhaps you should sit down and rest. I smirked. The sass on these two is uncanny. I gripped my spear tight. I narrowed my vision, and I threw it. I threw it barely an inch from Stelios' face, just barely missing him, and through the bodies of 4 Persians. A bead of sweat dropped down Stelios' face and Astynos laughed heartily at the man's stupor. I think you should step aside and let a real man show you how it's done, juniors. I told Stelios and Astynos. The ground shook. Xerxes' beast masters approached the field, flailing around their flags and bone hammers. Xerxes has summoned his legendary beasts. A large 4-legged monster charged through the Persian line and made a straight line towards us. I smirked and grabbed my spear from the bodies of the 4 men and jammed it into Astynos' hands. Time to prove yourself, boy, I told Astynos. He shook his head and grabbed firmly onto my spear. It was heavier than most. So, the boy needed to be careful. He needed to focus and aim precisely. Astynos raised the spear above his head and threw it. Without moving forward. Without momentum. A hard task to do, especially when your target is this large and has so much speed. His strike was good. Right into the creature's eyes. The beast continued charging and Astynos stood firm. His courage strong. The beast falls and skids across the field, stopping just beside Astynos. I pat the boy on the back as he pulls my spear out. He hands it to me with a grin on his face. Old man, don't press your luck, boy, I told Astynos. The beasts failed. So, Xerxes' army turns to their magic. Balls of exploding fire and metal fall upon us. I block the explosions with my shield. It was hard and the vibrations still hurt my hands. I knew I had to get them. Take them out some way. Somehow. And soon. Stelios? With me. I shout to the man. I roll out of the way of the fire and use my shield to cover myself and Stelios as we make our way to the front line of Persians. The ground shook around us. The armies of all Asia funneled into this small corridor. Their numbers count for nothing. Stelios and I dodge the explosions. The metal and fire burning our lungs. But we press on. I slide on my knee and raise my shield, strong. A foothold is made. A foothold for Stelios. Stelios leaps over the Persians and assaults the mages behind. Timaeus, shield yourself. Stelios shouted to me. I spun on my heel and brought my shield up to cover my body. Their fireballs exploded all at once. The combined explosion shook the gates. And killed our enemies. When I stood back up, I saw Stelios laughing, like a maniac. Nice job. But look. I told the man as I pointed to the endless horde on the horizon. More to come. Let's make haste and regroup. Stelios nodded and we fell back to join the others. Our hours of fighting paying off. We hold these gates, and we win. We send the severed horns and headless bodies back to Xerxes' feet. Xerxes himself punishes his generals for their failures. An unfair punishment when facing us Spartans. Xerxes dispatches his hordes of monster from continents away. They are big and clumsy beasts. They fall easily. Fighting on the narrow path, we push the large and roaring beasts over the edge of the path with our spears. For hours this repeats, filling our minds with hope. Ha! Astynos grunted as he stabbed the man at his feet. Watch your back, boy, I told him as I blocked a sword strike meant for his head with my shield. I spun around and slit the man's throat with my blade. What are you still here? Astynos asked. Someone's gotta watch your back, boy, Stelios told the boy. The 3 of us fought together, back to back. I ducked under Stelios' arm as he swung his blade at the man behind me. I then stabbed out and hit the man behind him the gut and Astynos sliced through the man in front of him. Once I got to my feet, I brushed myself off and patted the boy on the back. Well done, Astynos, I told the boy. He grinned, like a puppy, he grinned. I nodded at the boy and started walking over to the pile of dead Persians to retrieve my spear. Regroup, Leonidas ordered. I grabbed my spear and stood beside Leonidas as I cleaned my spear of the blood. Astynos, Artemis shouted. He spotted his boy and smiled. My son. Astynos and his father locked eyes and nodded at each other. The boy has been desperate for his father's approval. And now he has it. I smile at the boy. He has done Sparta justice. This is his moment, and he has more than earned it. However, my smile soon fades, as from out of the smoke a Persian on horseback approaches. Astynos, Artemis shouted. I raised my spear as fast as I could and threw it as hard as I could to try and kill the man before he could kill the boy. My spear connected with the man and launched him from his horse, but it was too late. No, Artemis screamed as his son's head fell from his shoulders. I closed my eyes and sighed. A young life taken. Artemis removes his helmet and begins walking towards his son. Damn it, Artemis. I ran after the man as he blindly slashed and killed the Persians coming at us. I blocked one of their blades with my shield. I spun around and with my sword cut the man's head off while also bashing another man's face in with the edge of my shield. Left and right the Persians came. However, with the condition he was in, Artemis was nothing but a distraction. Dead weight. Once it was clear I grabbed onto Artemis and drug him as he screamed in pain to the back of our phalanx formation. And there I held him. Artemis. Control yourself, my friend. Control. He is a big and burly man. And he is powerful. But I'm still stronger. I hold him. I simply hold him. My king and the others finish the battle. The day is won. But at a terrible cost. No songs of victory are sung this night. I sat with Artemis, for hours as he roared in pain and anger and anguish, not once leaving my friend's side in his time of need. For hours I sit with him. For hours he cries. For hours. For hours. Eventually, he quiets. And sleeps. and for the first time that day, I leave his side and return to the others. Captain. Stelios greeted me as he tended to the wounds of one of the men who had been cut, using a burning blade to sear the wound shut. Well meet, Stelios, my friend, I replied. I continued walking amongst the men, their spirits not crushed, but down. Astino's death impacted them. We were all seasoned veterans in war, the best of the best. Astinos, so young and foolish, had quickly proved himself one of us, and just as quickly his journey had ended, but he would not be forgotten. His name would be carried on through centuries, as long as Sparta still stands at the end of this war. Captain. Leonidas spoke. My king, I replied. How is he? He asked me. I don't know. His body is strong, but his mind. Even I can't tell you the truth. I told Leonidas. I see. Leonidas replied. Come with me. He spoke. I nodded and followed him among the men. Dilios. Leonidas spoke. The man looked towards us, one of his eyes covered by a sash now. Captain. My king. Dilios spoke. I trust that scratch hasn't made you useless. Leonidas asked the man. Hardly, my lord. It is just an eye. God saw fit to grace me with a spare. Dilios told the man. He has a way with words like no other. Dilios, I sometimes wonder what the world would be like if he were a poet. The sound of horse hooves trotting along the ground sounded out. Leonidas. Daxos, the Arcadian rode towards us with urgency, his face wrought with grief. Daxos hopped off his horse and ran towards us. We are undone. Undone, I tell you. Destroyed. Daxos spoke. Daxos, control yourself. Leonidas ordered the man. We are undone. A hunchbacked traitor has led the Persians along the hidden goat path behind us. Daxos explained. I felt the wind in my sails leave completely as I knew now that any hope for victory we had was gone. I truly wasn't going to see my family again. But now the only other thing we could do was hold out for as long as possible, and give our people time to muster their strength. The Phoenicians you posted there were scattered without a fight. This battle is over, Leonidas. Daxos told Leonidas. This battle is over, when I say it is over. Leonidas told Daxos. By morning the immortals will surround us. The hot gates will fall. Daxos exclaimed. Spartans, prepare for glory. Leonidas shouted to the heavens. Have you gone mad? Daxos asked. Surely, he did not ask that question. Did he think the thought of death plagued us? We are Spartans? We do not fear death, Daxos. I told the man. There is no glory to be had now, only retreat or surrender or death. Daxos explained. Well, that's an easy choice for us, Arcadian. Spartans never retreat, Spartans never surrender. Leonidas declared. Go spread the word. Let every Greek assemble know the truth of this, and each among them search their soul, and while you're at it, search your own. Leonidas told the man. Daxos grit his teeth and turned and walked away from the king, but not before speaking one last time. My men will leave with me. Godspeed, Leonidas. Daxos hopped on his horse and rode into the night, away from the fight. A coward. Children, children. Leonidas spoke. Gather around. Leonidas ordered. Upon his word every Spartan got to their feet and listened in on our king. No retreat. No surrender. That is Spartan law, and by Spartan law we will stand and fight, and die. A new age has begun. An age of freedom, and all will know that 300 Spartans gave their last breaths to defend it. Leonidas exclaimed. Ohu, ohu, ohu. We chanted. I heard whispers and murmurs. I turned towards my men and saw Artemis had finally joined us. Artemis, my friend. Leonidas and I both greeted our friend. The pain in his eyes still stung, and his composure weakened. Weaker than ever I had seen before. I have lived my entire life without regret until now. It's not that my son gave up his life for his country. It's just that I never told him that I loved him the most. Artemis spoke. I felt his pain. That he stood by me with honor. That he was all that was best in me. Artemis spoke. Leonidas and I both approached the man. I placed my hand on his shoulder and squeezed. Not many men in Sparta could get away with that. Not many men in Sparta could do the things we could do. Not many men in Sparta were as close as us. My heart is broken for your loss. Leonidas told Artemis. Heart? I have filled my heart with hate. Artemis spoke. Good. Leonidas replied. Dilios, Timaeus. Let's take a walk. Leonidas spoke. His voice heavy and filled with burden. Dilios and I followed without a word, without an inch of hesitation. We walked up a cliff, alone, where no one else could hear us. What is it, Leonidas? I asked. This first part is for Dilios. He replied. Dilios, I want you to return to Sparta. Leonidas spoke. Both Dilios and I widened our eyes upon the man's words. His declaration for Dilios to retreat a surprise. Sire, I am fit and ready to fight. Dilios told Leonidas. I'm sure you are. One of the finest. But you have a talent unlike any other Spartan. Leonidas told the man. You are to deliver my final orders to the council with force and valor. Tell them our story. Let every Greek know what happened here. You have a grand tale to tell, my friend. A tale of victory. Leonidas spoke. I did not know what he spoke of, but he sounded so sure. Victory? Dilios asked. His question went unanswered. So, Dilios simply shook his head. Yes. Yes, my lord. Dilios spoke. Leonidas placed his hands on the man's shoulders and shook him. Sire, any message for the queen? Dilios asked. For the queen? No, Leonidas replied. He took off his necklace and handed it to Timaeus. None that need be spoken. And you, my captain? Timaeus asked. This is it. The last chance to send a message. I reached up and removed the necklace from my body. It was time for this gift to return to where it belonged. I also removed the bracelet and handed both to Timaeus. Tell them. Timaeus. Tell them. I spoke. He knew what I meant. He took the gifts and nodded. And soon Timaeus had left for Sparta. The wind blowing past my face, I could feel it all building up. Every waking moment. Every drop of blood. Every drop of sweat. All leading to this. And what did you call me for, Leonidas? I asked. My friend. We have traveled many of years together. We have faced many battles and suffered many injuries. And despite everything we went through, we always stood together, strong, united. I wanted to offer you this chance to send something back. Leonidas spoke. I see. Thank you, Leonidas. May we meet again in the next world. So, that I may call you my brother once more. I extended my free hand and took Leonidas' forearm in my own. As do I, my brother. Come, let us greet our men one last time. Leonidas spoke. The walk back down was long, long and hard. Each step feels like a mile. The Arcadians. They leave by the hundreds. Only a handful stay. Timaeus looks back one last time and we nod goodbye to our brother who wishes to stay. Spartans, ready your breakfast and eat hearty. For tonight we dine in hell. Leonidas exclaimed. Avuhu. I raised my spear and shouted to the heavens as loud as I could. Ohu, 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 ohu. Chapter 7, Here by Spartan law we lie. We will cover ourselves from all angles. Our shields and spears will converge as a dome around all of us. And we will hold the position until Leonidas gives his commands. Are we clear, men? I asked. I explained to them every part of the plan. And expected only one answer. Ohu. Good answer. Hurry, they will be around us any moment now. I spoke. We quickly got into position as the sound of war drums, banging in the distance, grew closer. Only one of us wasn't shielded. Only our king stood alone, ready for death. The drumming grew closer, and the hour of legend arrived. Our hour of legend. An hour that will be known throughout the rest of history as the greatest act of sacrifice to date. The greatest victory and the greatest loss. Xerxes, his armies, and the traitor Ephialtes surrounded us on all sides. Our shields and spears the only thing between them and us. Between us, and death. Leonidas, I must compliment you, and congratulate you. You surely have turned calamity into victory. Despite your insufferable arrogance, the god King Xerxes has come to admire Spartan valor and fighting skill. You will make a mighty ally. The Persian spoke. His words smelled of honey but tasted of venom. You, Leonidas, use your reason. Think of your men. Ephialtes spoke. I beg you, listen to your fellow Greek. He can speak for the Divine One's generosity. Despite your several insults, despite your horrid blasphemies, the Lord of Hosts is prepared to forgive all. To reward your service. You fight for your lanes. Keep them. You fight for Sparta? She will be wealthier and more powerful than ever before. You fight for your kingship. You will be proclaimed warlord to all Greece, answerable only to the one true master of the world. Leonidas, your victory will be complete, if you but lay down your arms and kneel to holy Xerxes. The Persian was long-winded. He spoke of things he knew not, and his arrogance in addressing our king was vile. He has no idea how far we would go to stop the Persians. Leonidas was quiet. He didn't say a word. His sense heightened. The ocean breeze kissed his skin, as did the flaring sun, and behind him 300 Spartans all ready to fight and to die for him without a moment's hesitation. All 33 of us, all ready to die. His helmet is stifling. He removes it. His shield is heavy, so he discards it. Your spear. The Persian spoke. Leonidas raised it and pointed at the man. The traitor. Ephialtes. You there, Ephialtes. May you live forever. Leonidas told the man. His message seemed kind, but for a Spartan there was no bigger disgrace. Forbidden and blessed to never receive a glorious death is the ultimate dishonor. Leonidas, your spear. The Persian demanded. Leonidas sighed and dropped his spear to the ground. His knees bend and his head bows low. Xerxes believes he has won. Our king is quiet. The breeze blowing and in a moment. He two words. Timaeus, Stelios. The Spartans break way and we both run towards our king. His back heavy and strong. A foothold for the both of us. Stelios and I launch off of Leonidas' back and thrust our spears into the Persian emissary's chest, killing him. We then both retreat back and protect our king. Slaughter them. Xerxes demanded. A steady hail of arrows and spears came our way. The battle has started. And now it is a fight for survival. His helmet was stifling. It narrowed his vision, and he must see far. His shield was heavy, it threw him off balance. And his target was far away. Leonidas chucked his spear and the impossible was proven possible. God King Xerxes bled. I raised my spear and swung it right and left, cutting the two men in front of me in half. I spun on my heels swinging it around multiple times and decapitating immortals and Persians alike. I then released my spear and flung it through the bodies of 6 men. I drew my blade and engaged the coming foes. I cut the 2 men in front of me down, slashing them across their chest. I then threw my shield so hard that it decapitated every single man it hit. I turned back around and raised my blade. but I was met with 3 spears to my gut. Guh. I spit up a mouthful of blood and nearly toppled over. I could feel the cold steel in my body, my lungs filling with blood and my vision blurring. But I would not die, not easily. I snapped up straight. I swung my blade and cut the 2 men on my sides in half along with their spears, leaving only the hilts in my body. I then grabbed the one directly in front of me and pulled the spear through my body further. I roared. Long and loud, I roared. I raised my blade and stabbed the man in his throat. He fell. In the corner of my blurring eyes, I see Artemis, felled. My heart pains. Stelios falls as well. Arrows filling his body. Dinocales, Thermapes, Ludocres, Steripes, Nilius, all of my brothers falling. And through the pain, I finally collapse as well. The number of arrows having filled my body enough to kill 10 men. Leonidas. I shouted. My king looked to me as I crawled on my hands and knees towards him. I collapsed next to him and Stelios barely breathing. Stelios reached out for Leonidas, as did I. Leonidas, still standing, took both of our hands. My king. It is an honor to die by your side. Stelios spoke. It was an honor to have lived by yours, my friends, my brothers. Leonidas spoke. Stelios smiled and passed away. Leonidas got to his feet and shouted to the heavens, my queen, my wife, my love. Leonidas spoke. I can't give up. I can't give in. Leonidas. I bellowed. I grabbed his cape and pulled myself to my feet. Blood pouring out of my body. The Persians raised their bows and arrows and fired, thousands of arrows hitting us. In the brief moment my heart stopped. My body moved as arrows pelted my body. I grabbed my shield and raised it. One last dash. One last push. One last stand. Ah! I shouted. Visions of my past flashing before my eyes. My queen, my wife, my love, my princess, my daughter, my warrior, my son, my life. I leapt through the air, trying my best to end Xerxes. But it was for naught. I was beset upon by their magic. Numerous large fireballs fell upon me. I raised my shield to block and I was sent flying. Over the cliff's edge, away from my brothers. I lost my shield. It fell into the waters below. All that remained was my sword. I raised it to my head and held it. I focused. He focused. Timaeus' sword was heavy. Heavier than any Spartans before or after. His vision was blurry, and he only had one chance. He threw his sword. With all his might he threw his sword. And it hit. Not the target he intended, by far. But it hit. The white bubble around his sword went unnoticed by him at the time. But not by Xerxes or his men. No, when the white bubbled sword hit the ground, a crack appeared and all of Xerxes' army that stood near that sword was destroyed. Wiped out with one move. Timaeus hit the seas below and was swept away. Chapter 8. Remember us? I returned to Sparta and returned the gifts to both the queen and to Hippolyta. But I wasn't ready. When I brought Hippolyta the news of her husband's death, the strong Spartan woman crumbled, as did her daughter. Her tears, like spears falling in the icy wind. I wish I could stay to comfort them, but that is done well enough by Jason. Timaeus, you leave behind a fine son, my friend. As for me, I have a job to do, and I will see it through, no matter what. I journeyed to Jerusalem, where I told them I was going to speak no matter what. Dilios, what are you speaking of? Why are you here? One of the councilmen asked me. Listen, and listen well, for I have a story to tell, and orders to fulfill. I bring to you the last orders from our king. Remember us. As simple an order a king can give. Remember why we died. For he did not wish tribute, or song, no monuments, no poems of war and valor. His wish was simple. Remember us. He said to me. That was his hope. Should any free soul come across that place, in all the countless centuries yet to be, let all our voices whisper to you from the ageless stones. Go tell a Spartan's passerby that here by Spartan law we lie. That is what he said to me. That is our King Leonidas' final wish. That is our brothers. Each and every single one of them. That is their final wish. To remember why we died. I relayed my king's last orders and left the Jerusalem. The cowards who abandoned us without speaking another word. Chapter 9, Meeting of Gods. Poseidon. The boy. He died. Hestia had been the one to tell Poseidon the news of the death of his son. I see. Then his is just a failure like his brothers. Hestia was taken aback by his response. She knew he didn't care much for the ongoings on the mortal world. He hardly ever intervened on the ocean for humans unless there was an enemy pantheon invading. But she didn't think he would gladly dismiss his own son's death. How could you be so cruel, Poseidon? The boy has accomplished much. Hestia spoke. Yet, he still failed when it counted. Poseidon replied. He couldn't even awaken his godly heritage. Guess, I'll have to try again. Maybe later. Poseidon spoke. What about his children? Hestia asked. I can't let stray god roam loose. Poseidon replied. Poseidon, you can't be serious. Hestia asked in disbelief. Poseidon rose from his chair in the seas and summoned one of his sons, the mighty Triton. You called father? Triton asked. Yes, son. I have a task for you, I need completed. Poseidon spoke. His voice booming and full of power. The seas around Triton churned until an image appeared in front of him. An image of a family. Triton, my son. These 3 humans have committed an ultimate sin, and must be punished. Poseidon told the man. What did they do, father? Triton asked. He was loyal to his father and would carry out his missions with utmost precision. But he would not blindly kill an innocent. Poseidon knew this. Leave, Hestia. I have many things to inform my son on. You may return to Olympus, or wherever it is you came from. Poseidon spoke. He knew in his mind he could not lie, not in front of Hestia. Amongst all the gods on Mount Olympus, she was one of the honest ones, if not the most honest. And Hestia, poor beautiful, brave and honest Hestia. She never believed her brothers or sisters could be as horrible as they really were. I can't let this happen. I can't stop Triton from going. But I can hide them. Lady Hestia, news from the human you told us to watch. One of Hestia's subjects. Hestia read the parchment in disbelief. Her eyes wide in shock. She then took the parchment and burned it in her hands. No one must know of this. This stays between you and I. Hestia spoke. Bless you, young Spartan. Bless you for your sacrifice. Hestia whispered. Her heart ached for the people of Greece. They had lost many wonderful warriors during the battle at the Hot Gates, and by the year's end, they'd lose more. At the very least, I can try to keep your family out of harm's way. I make no guarantees, but I will do my best. Hestia spoke. Chapter 10, Character Bio. Timaeus. Height, 6 feet 4 inches. Weight, unknown. Eye color, blue. Hair color, blonde. Race, half-god/half mutant. Mutant ability, tremor. He takes more after his father than just his affinity for water. His X gene gives him the ability to create earthquake bubbles. Awakened during the final moments of the battle at the Hot Gates. Bio, son of Poseidon and Antiope of Sparta. Born 450 BC. He was believed to be the son of Spartan general Hermes. At 1 week old he took his first steps. At week 4 he spoke his first words. In just 1 month he could read. He lived a rigid and painful life. Always amongst the first on a battlefield and one of the last to leave. He cared deeply for his men, treating them as equals despite their rank. He is most famous for his many naval victories. His skill on the oceans and his knowledge in their phases is rivaled by only Poseidon himself. He has fought many battles alongside Leonidas and fellow captain Artemis. His name is known through all of Sparta. He fought valiantly during the battle at the Hot Gates, taking down more than 1,000 of the enemy's forces with his own hands. Chapter 11, Awakening. Feeling. I can feel something. It had been dark for so long and my body heavier than stone. I may be dead or worse. I could simply be stuck in between the living world and the afterlife. I don't know, but I will find out. I feel something rubbing my body, something hard. Hands? My eyes snapped open, and I jolted up off my back and grabbed a hold of the young boy, who had been searching my body, and I glared at him. Sorry sir. I thought you were dead. The boy bellowed, his eyes full of fear and terror. *GRWWWWL. The sound of the boy's stomach rumbling caught my attention. He reached down and grabbed it in pain. He looked deathly ill, frail, small, like he hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks. Are you all right, boy? I asked. Yes sir. Sorry. Just haven't eaten in days. The Persians destroyed the village. He spoke, his eyes full of sadness. The Persians. I grit my teeth in anger and despair and pain. I looked around and felt like tearing my own throat out. I was alive. How? I looked down at my body and couldn't believe my eyes. Every single wound I had received was gone, as if they were never there in the first place. In fact, my whole body felt different. I don't know how, but I feel so much stronger than I was before. My brothers, I have failed you. I whispered as I hid my face. Sir, your cape. Are you a Spartan? The boy asked. I looked at the boy and nodded. I was. Yes. But no, I'm nothing more than a disgrace. I told the boy honestly. *GRWWWWL. Are you hungry, boy? I asked. Yes sir. He replied. I got on my feet and walked to the ocean waters. Inside them I saw something bright and shiny. My shield. I reached down and grabbed hold of it. My eyes threatening to burst open, allowing the water behind them to flow. It was all I had left. My sword and spear gone. But I at least still had my shield. Do you know where we are? I asked the boy. We're near a small village just south of Delphi. Or it was, but a bunch of Persians came through and killed everyone they saw. The boy explained. I see. I spoke. Hey, you there? Stay where you are. A man's voice shouted. Oh no, they found us. The boy exclaimed in fear. He ran up to me and hid behind my legs. I turned towards the small Persian unit coming towards us. I raised my shield to protect myself and the boy. This was going to be difficult. I'm practically unarmed and the boy is weak. I have to be careful. A Spartan. I thought we wiped you all out at the Hot Gates. Your gods must have felt pity on you, to spare your life. Or perhaps they are punishing you for your loss. Either way, it doesn't really matter, now does it? Lay down your weapons and surrender and we might let you live. The Persian spoke. His arrogance great. Though not without reason. Come and get them. I told the man. You're not really going to fight them, are you? The boy asked, his face buried into my leg. I mean, you don't even have a weapon. He whispered. They don't know that. Now, stand back and keep your head down. I'll handle this. I told the boy. It wouldn't be the first time I've had to kill an enemy with a weapon while I was unarmed. And it probably won't be the last. But they were mere bandits, and these are soldiers. Two completely different kind of foes. Bandits fight dirtier than anyone else. A real threat. These guys, just dead weight. Ah! The Persian unit charged me together, their spears and swords raised and ready to kill. I spun on my heel and drove my shield upwards, blocking the first, causing the man to stumble backwards. I spun on my heel and with all my might punched towards the man. My punch landed square in the man's chest. It was like a blur, it was so quick I almost didn't see what happened. The instant my fist connected, a crack appeared. The air cracked and what followed shocked me even more. The Persian and everything behind him, man, land, sea, and air. All of it was blown away, eviscerated, turned to dust and scattered in the wind. The ground tremored viciously for quite a while. But finally, it all cleared. I looked out at the carnage I caused in shock and awe. I couldn't believe that I did such a thing. How did I do such a thing? I looked down at my hand. It was like flexing a new muscle. A muscle I never had before. It was destructive. It was breathtaking. It was exhilarating. It was incredible. Wow, that was incredible. What are you, mister? Are you a god? The boy asked, his excitement suddenly overpowering his previous fear. No, just a man. Come on, let's go get you some food. I gestured for the boy to follow me, and I began walking. Where? Home. That was my goal at least. But first, I need to find a place for the boy. He's not a Spartan and I don't think he would find much success in the Agoge. So, until I can find a home for him, then I will watch over him. Perhaps, someone in Delphi would be willing to take the boy. I also need to learn this new power. If I can, I might just be able to stop Xerxes and his Persian army for good. At the very least, I owed it to my brothers that I left behind to see this through until the end. How else could I face them in Elysium? Hippolyta, Diana, Jason. My family. Wait for me. Just a little while longer. Wait for me. May the gods watch over you until then. Chapter 12, Ghost of Sparta. I walked. With Theseus beside me, I walked towards the site of the village. The boy had informed me that a group of Persians had been holed up there. If they were still there, then I would gain everything I need for my trip. As I approached the ruined village, I looked to the Theseus. Is this the place you spoke of? I asked the boy. His tired little eyes seemed to shed a tear as he gazed upon the ruins. He looked back at me and nodded. I placed my hand on top of his head and rubbed it softly. Don't worry, I'll handle this quickly. You just sit here out of sight and wait until I return. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't do anything to get yourself caught. Do you understand me? I explained to the boy. I wanted him to be safe. I couldn't protect him if I was fighting. And I couldn't use this power around anyone until I was sure I could control it. There could be survivors. If there were any, they'd probably be women. If not, then I could still salvage any food and water. Theseus nodded and got down and hid in a bush. With him out of sight and safe, I approached the village, with my shield raised and ready. The first thing I saw when I walked into the village was a pile of bodies. I approached the bodies carefully, making sure not to make any noise to draw attention to myself. I was confident I could handle the Persians with a weapon in my hand. But I can't confidently say that I could do that right now. I checked the pile of bodies, they were all males. Meaning there was hope for the women and children to still be alive. I made my way further into the village, taking quick peeks into each and every building I could. This one has smoke coming from it. I mumbled. I slowly opened the door to the stone building. Once inside, I spotted two Persians sleeping, and chained up next to them was a woman. She was badly beaten. Bruises all over her body. I walked up to the two men and leaned down over them. I took the first Persian in my hands, gripping his head with all my strength. His eyes popped open, and his vision was suddenly turned upside down. I twisted his head upside down. I only meant to break it, but I ended up turning it entirely upside down. Oh well, no sympathy from me. I then moved over to the next guy. I repeated the same thing. This guy didn't even wake up when I grabbed him. With those two out of the way, I trotted over to the woman. I leaned down and placed my finger on her neck. She was cold to the touch. Gone. Raped and beaten to death. Forgive us, was all I said to the woman. If I can easily twist a man's head around, I figured it shouldn't be too much to break her chains. So, I tried. I reached up and took hold of the chains. And with all my might I pulled. The chains came undone. With ease, they came undone. This was the least I could do for you. Travel well into the afterlife. I stood back up and walked over the men. Grabbing one of their spears and one of their swords, I walked back out of the brick house and out and began working. Persians. I shouted as loud as I could. I wanted to get this over with as fast as possible. Persians began pouring out into the open streets, swords and spears in hand and barely even dressed. The disgust I felt when I realized what they've been doing here. All I could do was stare at them blankly. The Persians wasted no time in attacking. I raised the spear over my head and slammed it down on the first man's head, splitting him in two. I spun around and used the spear to cut another Persian's head off. I got to my feet, blood on my face, and glared at the rest of the small unit. There was easily 20 Persians still standing. Trash. I took a step forward and before I knew it, I was in front of the mob. I pushed the spear forward and through his chest and through the man behind him. I pulled it out and slashed down to my right, dropping another man. I gripped the spear hard and swung it horizontally, cutting through Persians left and right like butter. I swung the spear so hard it snapped into with ease. I pulled the sword from my belt and spun with it in my hands, easily cutting off the arm of the Persian trying to take my back. I continued spinning and used the momentum to slam my shield into his face. With one hit I punched the man's head off his shoulders. What is this guy? He's a demon. The Persians shouted. We need to run. Run? No, you're done. I raised the shield, and with as much force as I could, launched it at the men. The shield bounced off the side of a building and hit one of the men in his head before rebounding back to me. I then raised the sword and threw it. The blade spun in the air, like a saw, and hit the man in his back. The Persian hollered. The sword sticking in his back had pinned him to the ground. I slowly walked over to the screaming man. Once there, I reached down and lifted the man up off the ground. I grabbed the hilt of the sword and drove my hand through the man's back with it, while also snapping his neck. Once he was dead, I pulled my arm back out of his body and let him drop to the ground. I looked around at the bodies and scoffed. Worthless. XXX. A little later, after disposing of the guards, I filled up a bag full of food and water, and then I began tending to the bodies of the deceased villagers. I cremated them all, sending them off into the afterlife with some form of closure. Taking a look at these people, I came to a realization. I can't go home. Not yet. So long as the monster known as Xerxes and his army are still invading Greece, we will never be safe. I have power now, and I fully intend to use it to destroy Xerxes, and anyone who stands in my way will suffer for it. XXX. Olympus. I watched as the boy took the Persians apart with ease. He's quite powerful. Maybe more so than Triton, or Polyphemus. His strength reminds of Poseidon's when he first arrived in Kronos' stomach. Maybe I should have sent the boy with his mother and sister. But Amazonia only allows women. And the boy was to begin his agoge soon. If he had another year, then he would be safe under Ares. But with his agoge coming at the end of the year, I fear it won't be hard for Triton to find the boy. I can only hope that he finds his son before Triton. I'm sorry, Timaeus, but I cannot interfere any more than I already have. I wish you nothing but the best. At least sleep knowing the daughters of Artemis and the Amazons will take care of the girls. Your son will have to earn his stripes as a Spartan. At the very least, while he remains in Sparta, Poseidon won't be able to move on him, not with Ares watching it. Forgive me for not being of much help, but I just know you'll come to do great things one day. Hestia spoke as she watched Timaeus and Theseus on their journey. On the other side of Olympus, the girls are hidden, and the boy remains in Sparta under the watchful eyes of my dear nephew, Ares. While he's there, Triton won't be able to so much as look at him without incurring Ares' wrath. No doubt, this is Hestia's doing. Somehow, I just know she's involved. Well, two can play this game, sister. Polyphemus, I have a job for you. Poseidon spoke. On a distant island a beast awoke. The Cyclops, Polyphemus. Yes, father. Chapter 12, Ghost of Sparta. I walked. With Theseus beside me, I walked towards the site of the village. The boy had informed me that a group of Persians had been holed up there. If they were still there, then I would gain everything I need for my trip. As I approached the ruined village, I looked to the Theseus. Is this the place you spoke of? I asked the boy. His tired little eyes seemed to shed a tear as he gazed upon the ruins. He looked back at me and nodded. I placed my hand on top of his head and rubbed it softly. Don't worry, I'll handle this quickly. You just sit here out of sight and wait until I return. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't do anything to get yourself caught. Do you understand me? I explained to the boy. I wanted him to be safe. I couldn't protect him if I was fighting. And I couldn't use this power around anyone until I was sure I could control it. There could be survivors. If there were any, they'd probably be women. If not, then I could still salvage any food and water. Theseus nodded and got down and hid in a bush. With him out of sight and safe, I approached the village, with my shield raised and ready. The first thing I saw when I walked into the village was a pile of bodies. I approached the bodies carefully, making sure not to make any noise to draw attention to myself. I was confident I could handle the Persians with a weapon in my hand. But I can't confidently say that I could do that right now. I checked the pile of bodies. They were all males, meaning there was hope for the women and children to still be alive. I made my way further into the village, taking quick peeks into each and every building I could. This one has smoke coming from it. I mumbled. I slowly opened the door to the stone building. Once inside, I spotted two Persians sleeping, and chained up next to them was a woman. She was badly beaten. Bruises all over her body. I walked up to the two men and leaned down over them. I took the first Persian in my hands, gripping his head with all my strength. His eyes popped open, and his vision was suddenly turned upside down. I twisted his head upside down. I only meant to break it, but I ended up turning it entirely upside down. Oh well, no sympathy from me. I then moved over to the next guy. I repeated the same thing. This guy didn't even wake up when I grabbed him. With those two out of the way, I trotted over to the woman. I leaned down and placed my finger on her neck. She was cold to the touch. Gone. Raped and beaten to death. Forgive us, was all I said to the woman. If I can easily twist a man's head around, I figured it shouldn't be too much to break her chains. So, I tried. I reached up and took hold of the chains, and with all my might I pulled. The chains came undone. With ease, they came undone. This was the least I could do for you. Travel well into the afterlife. I stood back up and walked over the men. Grabbing one of their spears and one of their swords, I walked back out of the brick house and out and began working. Persians. I shouted as loud as I could. I wanted to get this over with as fast as possible. Persians began pouring out into the open streets, swords and spears in hand and barely even dressed. The disgust I felt when I realized what they've been doing here. All I could do was stare at them blankly. The Persians wasted no time in attacking. I raised the spear over my head and slammed it down on the first man's head, splitting him in two. I spun around and used the spear to cut another Persian's head off. I got to my feet, blood on my face, and glared at the rest of the small unit. There was easily 20 Persians still standing. Trash. I took a step forward and before I knew it, I was in front of the mob. I pushed the spear forward and through his chest and through the man behind him. I pulled it out and slashed down to my right, dropping another man. I gripped the spear hard and swung it horizontally, cutting through Persians left and right like butter. I swung the spear so hard it snapped into with ease. I pulled the sword from my belt and spun with it in my hands, easily cutting off the arm of the Persian trying to take my back. I continued spinning and used the momentum to slam my shield into his face. With one hit I punched the man's head off his shoulders. What is this guy? He's a demon. The Persians shouted. We need to run. Run? No, you're done. I raised the shield, and with as much force as I could, launched it at the man. The shield bounced off the side of a building and hit one of the men in his head before rebounding back to me. I then raised the sword and threw it. The blade spun in the air, like a saw and hit the man in his back. The Persian hollered. The sword sticking in his back had pinned him to the ground. I slowly walked over to the screaming man. Once there I reached down and lifted the man up off the ground. I grabbed the hilt of the sword and drove my hand through the man's back with it, while also snapping his neck. Once he was dead, I pulled my arm back out of his body and let him drop to the ground. I looked around at the bodies and scoffed. Worthless. XXX. A little later, after disposing of the guards, I filled up a bag full of food and water and then I began tending to the bodies of the deceased villagers. I cremated them all, sending them off into the afterlife with some form of closure. Taking a look at these people, I came to a realization. I can't go home. Not yet. So long as the monster known as Xerxes and his army are still invading Greece, we will never be safe. I have power now and I fully intend to use it to destroy Xerxes, and anyone who stands in my way will suffer for it. XXX. Olympus. I watched as the boy took the Persians apart with ease. He's quite powerful. Maybe more so than Triton, or Polyphemus. His strength reminds of Poseidon's when he first arrived in Kronos' stomach. Maybe I should have sent the boy with his mother and sister. But Amazonia only allows women. And the boy was to begin his age soon. If he had another year, then he would be safe under Ares. But with his age coming at the end of the year, I fear it won't be hard for Triton to find the boy. I can only hope that he finds his son before Triton. I'm sorry, Timaeus, but I cannot interfere any more than I already have. I wish you nothing but the best. At least sleep knowing the daughters of Artemis and the Amazons will take care of the girls. Your son will have to earn his stripes as a Spartan. At the very least, while he remains in Sparta, Poseidon won't be able to move on him, not with Ares watching it. Forgive me for not being of much help, but I just know you'll come to do great things one day. Hestia spoke as she watched Timaeus and Theseus on their journey. On the other side of Olympus, the girls are hidden, and the boy remains in Sparta under the watchful eyes of my dear nephew, Ares. While he's there, Triton won't be able to so much as look at him without incurring Ares' wrath. No doubt, this is Hestia's doing. Somehow, I just know she's involved. Well, two can play this game, sister. Polyphemus, I have a job for you. Poseidon spoke. On a distant island a beast awoke. The Cyclops, Polyphemus. Yes, father. Chapter 13, Athens. 5 months passed. News of a man with the power to shake the ground beneath him and a little boy spread throughout all of Greece, reaching the ears of even the Persians. Especially the Persians. Their forces were being wiped out. Steadily, their forces which numbered in the 300,000 was now down to only 200,000. Hey, did you hear? Hear what? The ghost of Sparta was seen heading this way. Do you think he's here already? I don't know. I haven't felt the ground shaking or anything. So, maybe not. As Theseus and I walked through the streets of Athens, our faces hidden underneath the white robes we wore. Over the past 5 months, Theseus and I have been journeying across Greece, spending our time training and fighting the Persians. Theseus, who had been a skeleton when I first met him, now had a pretty decent build for a child his age. He catches on fast. *GRWWWL. Ha ha ha. If you were hungry, you should have said something. I told the boy after hearing his stomach rumbling. I didn't want to waste any time. I know we're on a mission. Theseus replied. I shook my head and patted the boy on his. You are still young and growing. You need food if you want to grow up to be big and strong. And I told you to tell me whenever you got hungry. I spoke. I was gentle with the boy, much more so than I was with my own son. He wasn't a Spartan, and I could not force that lifestyle on him. If anything, I want him to grow up happy and be able to experience everything the world has to offer him. I grabbed his wrist and walked with him over to one of the food stalls in the city. Let me get a barrel of apples, please. I told the fruit vendor. I reached into my robe and pulled out a bag of drachmae and placed it on the man's counter. He grinned widely and immediately got to work on filling up a barrel for me. Once he was finished, I grabbed it off the counter and took 4 apples out. 2 for me and 2 for Theseus. There wasn't much to get that was prepared right now, and I didn't have the means to make him a full meal. If we happen upon a wheat or maybe a fish stand, I could make him a more filling meal. But for now, this is the best we got. Thank you, Theseus spoke as he munched on his apple. What did I tell you about speaking with food in your mouth? I asked the boy. my eyes staring at him menacingly as threat. "Why, sorry," he exclaimed in terror. I smiled at the boy softly and patted him on the head again. "Just remember next time. Come on, I'm sure you're tired of walking. And I'd like a place to rest as well," I spoke. Theseus nodded and we began searching through the city for a place to sit and rest our feet from our far travel. Theseus and I eventually settled on a bench in the center of the city. I placed down the barrel of apples and began eating. When a flyer blew past me, Theseus grabbed the piece of parchment and began reading it. "In honor of the great Apollo, we celebrate Paeanopsia." "Oh, it's a festival offering for Apollo," Theseus exclaimed. "I didn't know he had a festival," I replied. Theseus looked at me in shock. "What? You've never celebrated Paeanopsia?" he asked. I shook my head and he jumped to his feet. "You make an offering to Apollo, and you're supposed to gain his blessing. It's like a trade of sorts. An offering of respect and he blesses you for a whole year," he explained, his eyes shining brightly as he did. "Well, that's good for him then," I replied. Theseus seemed to be a little upset by my response. If I'm guessing correctly, he probably wanted to join the festival. Thinking about it, we haven't done much of anything other than traveling and me fighting. I guess one night couldn't be so bad. "Do you want to go to the Acropolis?" I asked the boy. Theseus jumped up, surprising me. Can we really?" Theseus asked. I shook my head in disbelief. "Yes, I think we've earned a day off after such a long journey. And we are in Athens. It would be a shame not to experience the good old Athenian courtesy. We'll rest for now, and later on before night falls, we will go to the Acropolis," I told the boy. "Yes, let's go," he shouted. He excitedly sat back down and started munching on his apples again. I watched him as he grinned. His eager anticipation made me laugh a little. The boy looked up at me and laughed. His joy reminded me of the time I spent with my own son. "So, thank you," the boy spoke with a mouthful of bits and pieces of his apple. My smile vanished and my face turned angry. I reached down and grabbed the boy by his scruff. "What did I tell you about talking with your mouth full?" I asked. XXX. On the shores of Greece, miles and miles away from Athens and the Acropolis, Polyphemus rose from the water, his eye set intently on the Prytaneum, ancient shrine to the goddess Hestia. "Time to learn a lesson, little Hestia. No one challenges father and gets away with it unscathed. He can't touch you, but I can touch them." Polyphemus spoke. He raised his giant club and started walking towards the shrine. Chapter 14, Attack of the Cyclopes. We enjoyed our afternoon lunch of apples, and then due to his wanting to go, we began making our way to the Acropolis for Apollo's festival. Honestly, I didn't care much about festivals, but I can see why others enjoy them so much. A festival usually signals good times. A banquet, fun, and other events that usually pitted the people against each other in some way. A drinking contest, a tournament to see who's the better fighter or hunter. A day meant to be filled with happiness and joy. "Oh man, I can't wait. This is going to be so much fun. Aren't you excited?" Theseus asked me. I looked down at the boy and smirked. "I'm sure it will be a good evening," I replied. I didn't want to make the boy feel bad or anything. I just don't celebrate with strangers often. We walked through the streets of Athens, our destination the Acropolis. "Weary travelers? Are you two planning to participate in Paeanopsia?" An Athenian, a strange one at that, dressed in black garbs walked over to us and stood in front of us. "Yes, we are," I replied. I could tell Theseus wanted to speak, but I cut him off before he had the chance. I didn't like this guy one bit, he just reeked of trouble. "Then why don't you come with me? I'm sure it would only make the celebration more enticing." "What say you, dear traveler?" the man asked. His face contorted into a mischievous grin. "No thanks. Come on, boy." I grabbed Theseus by his arm and led him past the man. As I slid past him, I saw the man glaring at me while reaching into his robe. I turned around and grabbed the man's hand before he could remove whatever it was he was reaching for and squeezed hard enough to break his hand. "Ack," he cried. "Listen to me and listen well. You even think about attacking us again and I promise no god alive will be able to fix what I do to you," I told the man. "Do you understand me?" "Ack, yes, 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 for the love of the gods please, just let go," he cried. I released my grip, and the man went on scurrying away. "See that? That's why you don't travel alone as a kid. People like him are out there try to trick you with their appearances. Be careful on whom you parley with," I explained to Theseus, his attention still on the injured man hobbling away. "For now, let's get going. I'm sure we don't want to miss the festivities." XXX. As the sun set, we finally made it to the Acropolis. It was lively, there were streamers, foods of all kinds being served and offered, there was music, and women. An all-around good time. Theseus seemed to be having a good time. Theseus was currently on stage dancing with the other citizens of Athens. The little brat was having the time of his life and I'm happy for him. And I'm feeling a little happy myself. Guess this little excursion was exactly what we needed. I leaned up against one of the columns in the Acropolis and looked out over Athens. Athens was a beautiful city, especially at night. Especially this night. Lanterns were lit all over the city. The wind was blowing, not too hard and not too soft, but just right. It was peaceful. Something I haven't felt in a long time. Peace. I looked up into the starry night sky and closed my eyes. I took a deep breath and just sighed. I wish times like this could last forever. It actually feels nice to just be. I spoke. Everything was just fine. Until I felt the ground shaking and the sound of thunder in the distance. I was drawn back to reality by the intense shaking. I felt the air thick with killing intent. And the smell of blood was spreading all over. I turned around and ran to find Theseus as fast as I could. Running through crowds of Athenians and Arcadians to find the boy. I ran to the stage to find him, but there was no sight of him. Theseus? Theseus, where are you? I shouted as loud as I could. I looked around for Theseus. Seeing that I couldn't find him in the panicking crowd, I leapt into the air and landed on top of the Acropolis columns, where I could get a better overview of things. I scanned the crowds for the boy, and eventually I spotted him. He had been snatched by the man from earlier and a group of other black-robed men, and they were heading for Hestia's shrine below the Acropolis. I leapt off the Acropolis, columns removing my robes and freeing my shield and sword. Damn it! I took my eyes off of him for a moment. I should have known that bastard would come back. I'm gonna cut his damn head off. I rushed through the forest. The sound of thunder and the ground shaking more and more as I approached Hestia's shrine. Ah! My eyes snapped wide. The blood-curdling sound of screams coming just up ahead caught me off guard. Not because of the screams, but because they sounded like a grown man. But that's when it hit me. The roar of all roars. Ray-ay-ay-ay-ay. The ground trembled, the trees shook, and the wind rocked my body like a hurricane. This is no man. I spoke. I continued running. I knew Theseus was in even more danger than ever before now. As I ran, images of Theseus flashed into my mind. The first time we met, the first time he ate after his village was destroyed. Our trips across Greece, through Delphi, Corinth, Thebes, where we buried the boy's parents. His training, his smile. All of it shattered like glass when I came upon Hestia's shrine. It was a bloody mess. The shrine of Hestia had been dutifully destroyed. Bodies were littered everywhere, and standing in the center of the ruins was a giant. A beast unlike any other known to man of present day, known only to those of old. A cyclops. I screamed. The beast turned his attention towards me and smiled evilly. His one eye squinting. I missed one. Father would have my head if I let you go. You should have stayed hidden. You probably would have survived. Polyphemus spoke. And that red cape and shield. A Spartan? I see. You want to fight me? Polyphemus asked. I will strip the flesh from your bones. I exclaimed. Ha 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 ha, foolish boy. I am Polyphemus, son of Poseidon. You will taste no victory. Polyphemus decreed. His voice powerful and full of arrogance. You will taste your own blood. Chapter 15, Brothers. I charged Polyphemus. The thunderous force of a million earthquakes all surging ferociously through my veins. I channeled that energy into my shield, and as Polyphemus swung his massive, mountain-sized, club at me, I thrusted my shield forward. Asterisk crack. Twoom. The resulting shockwave of our collision blew away a large portion of the forest around us. I strained to push the Cyclops club back, and from the look on his face, he was struggling just as hard. Hooray! I gathered all my strength and forced the beast backwards, sending him stumbling until he managed to compose himself. His eye snapped up and he looked at me in disbelief. You aren't human. Who are you? He asked me. I didn't answer him. Instead, I grabbed my sword and charged him. I won't lose to you. Polyphemus shouted. He raised his club over his shoulder and ran at me as well. When he was close enough, he swung down at me again. This time, I jumped over his club and ran up along it. I wanted to hurt him, embarrass him, make him feel worthless, break his spirit. Then and only then would I allow him death's sweet embrace. But while he lived, he will suffer for hurting Theseus. I sent the same energy through my sword that I had sent into my shield, and I swung it towards Polyphemus' left arm, cutting a large gash in his flesh. Ack! Polyphemus hollered and grabbed his arm. I didn't let up. I dropped down from his large body and landed hard on the ground. 5 months ago a fall like that would have crippled me if not outright killed me, but I was not the same as I was before. I am so much stronger. I ran around the Cyclops' body and lunged at his right knee. I pulled back and sliced the back of his leg. Polyphemus' knee gave way and he fell to his knee. Ah, you bastard. You insignificant piece of shit. I swear I will kill you if it's the last thing I do. Polyphemus roared in absolute anger. He reached down and clumsily grabbed his club and swung it at me. I dropped my shield and clenched my fist. I swung my fist at the club as it approached my body and stopped it with an earthquake so fierce, it shattered the club on contact and blew away a large portion of the forest behind it. The force of the earthquake could be felt for miles, and it was a miracle that Hestia's shrine had managed to stay somewhat intact. Despite Polyphemus' earlier attack on it, and my onslaught on it as well. Polyphemus looked absolutely dreadful. His face full of fear and despair. His club, which is touted as the strongest amongst the Cyclops, was destroyed with ease, and by a man no less. Little did Polyphemus know the man he was fighting was his own brother. I leapt into the air, arriving just in front of Polyphemus' eye, and reeled my fist back. I sent every ounce of energy I could into my fist and slammed it into the brute's head. The sky cracked. This particular quake was stronger than anything I had produced until this point. Polyphemus' eye turned blood red, due to the fact that blood had erupted out of his eye, nose, and mouth. His body convulsed violently as my quakes continued passing through his body, until finally it stopped. Once they did, Polyphemus collapsed, falling all the way down onto his back and into a pile of his own blood. He was tough. With everything I hit him with just now, he was still breathing, albeit barely. I grabbed my sword and walked to the front of the beast's body, stopping right at his neck. Polyphemus spat up huge amounts of blood as he struggled to breathe. You aren't human. No, I haven't felt fury like this in a long time. Actually, now that I look at you, you remind me of father. Polyphemus spoke weakly. I stared down at Polyphemus in anger, my eyes staring coldly into his beet red vessel. I don't care what I look like. I told you, you'd die for what you've done. He. Do you think this victory matters? Do you think you've accomplished anything here? Well, you haven't. My brothers are all stronger than I am, much stronger, and they'll come for you. They'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. Belus, Neleus and Agenor, Atlas king of Atlantis, Chimapoleia, my sister, and the one who stands above us all, Triton. They will bring down the storms of Poseidon himself upon you, and you best pray my father doesn't decide to handle you himself. Polyphemus spoke. His threat was bold and dangerous. Poseidon's sons are all renowned gods in their own right, but no one's seen or heard of anyone from Atlantis in thousands of years. So, the chances of Atlas actually coming after me were slim to none. Belus was said to have gone to a different land a long time ago, which means my only true threats are Neleus, Agenor, and the deadliest of the group were the oldest of the siblings, Chimapoleia, goddess of the violent storm waves, and the legendary Triton, god of the sea. If these gods wish to test me as you have, then I will be ready. I will face whatever comes at me in the future. You on the other hand? I'm afraid you no longer have a future. The only thing that remains for you is death. I raised my sword and with a single swing, decapitated the Cyclops. The moment Polyphemus' head hit the ground, I felt an energy flow into me. I felt powerful, strong, stronger than before. Was it because I killed a Cyclops? Did I absorb his strength? I had no idea. But what I do know is I'm alone again. I sat down on the ground, the blood from Polyphemus flowing off of me, and hung my head. I gripped the hilt of my blade so hard that I swear I could hear it cracking, breaking even. The feeling of anger rising with every breath I took. I got to my feet and walked to the ruined shrine of Hestia. There were bodies everywhere, blood painted the pearly white stone scarlet. I walked to the center of the ruins and dropped to my knees. If anyone would answer my prayers, it would be Hestia herself. Hear me, Hestia, as I offer you my prayers. Please see young Theseus into the afterlife. He is a little young and extremely foolish, but he is a good kid, kind and innocent, something this world lacks severely. I hope you hear this, Hestia. Gods know, I've made some deadly enemies, and could use a friend for once. I got up and off my knees and dusted myself off. Hey, the loud-sounding voice caused me to jerk my whole body around. When I looked down, I saw Theseus standing there. How did I thought you? How are you alive, kid? I asked as I hugged the small boy. I don't know. I was taken by the man in black, and then when we reached the shrine, I was taken by light. And then I remember waking up over there, and I saw you here. Theseus explained. Light. I turned back to Hestia's shrine and saw that her statue had a smile on it. Could she? There's no way, right? I wondered. And as I looked at the statue, a faint glint of light could be seen in one of the eyes of the statue. I smirked and rubbed my hair back. I guess you heard me after all. Thank you, Hestia. I bowed to the statue and then turned back to Theseus. You really did it this time. You little troublemaker. I told the boy, but I didn't do anything. Theseus complained as we walked away from the ruins. XXX. At the moment that Polyphemus' head was taken, a wave was sent out across Greece that was felt by many of the gods and demigods of the lands. In Troy, a Cyclops was bested, and Uncle Poseidon's son Polyphemus no less. Finally, a challenge has arrived. It's been a long time since I've had the chance to flex my Herculean muscles. It's time for Hercules to meet this god slayer. Currently in the Aegean Sea, the seas churned and ships were smashed to pieces over the rage of the sea gods. My little brother is slain, and father wants me to continue this search for a small family. It's really his own fault for being so weak. Father should have known better to send the youngest of us to handle this. Even if he was weak, he was still our brother Chimapoleia, and there will be blood for this. So, Triton swears it. Lightning flashed and waves the size of mountains slammed into the cliffs of Greece. On Mount Olympus, Ares' lair. Oh, boy, things are heating up in Greece. It's been a long time since my blood has been this shaken. As the god of war, I guess I should pay more attention. Mount Olympus, lair of Athena. So, a demigod has been slain. It's been a long time since one has fallen. I wonder who had the might to best Polyphemus? Well, if anything, I have something to hold over Poseidon now. Mount Olympus, Apollo's lair. He deserved it. He ruined my festival. Poseidon better be glad I didn't kill him myself. Mount Olympus throne room. What do you think, husband? I think things are starting to shake up. First the Persians and their insignificant gods. And now this. I fear Olympus is heading towards disaster. You worry too much, Zeus. For now, rest yourself. Your battle against a hero of the Persian gods has rendered you slightly injured. If you worry too much, you'll only hasten your demise. Silence. Down below in the depths of Tartarus. Ha 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 ha, if only I could see it now. What, Lord Hades? Why, Persephone, my dear? If only I could see just how utterly enraged my dear brother, Poseidon, is right now. He. Mount Olympus, Poseidon's domain. The storms raged, lightning flickered, the ground shook, and the wind raged. Poseidon was angered far more than he had ever been. Not only did his son fail, but he was also killed. The veins in Poseidon's head throbbed in anger as he stared out over his domain. Chapter 16, Gods Among Men. Hey, where are we going next? Theseus asked me. It was a fair question. I hadn't said much to him after my battle with the Cyclops. And to be fair, even I didn't know completely. I had heard news of a gathering being held, all of Greece being brought together. They were planning one final battle against Xerxes and his armies, but that would take months to plan, and a suitable battlefield must be chosen, and I would head there now. But with his last words, Polyphemus told me his siblings were coming. Polyphemus was no weakling, far from it. Triton is heralded as the mightiest of Poseidon's children. I've really done it this time. I spoke as I rubbed my face. Gonna have to make a choice, and fast. Theseus still cannot take care of himself, and he is still too trusting of strangers. I cannot simply leave him anywhere, but I cannot allow him to follow me into this battle. Not this one. This isn't an army of pretentious Persians. These were gods. My choices were slim, but not completely gone. There is news of a place in Troy that shelters kids of the war. If I can get him to Troy, then I'll be able to focus all of my attention on these gods. That would be my best option. Yes. Done what? Theseus asked, his small face contorted in utter confusion. We're going to be heading to Troy for a bit. I told the boy. I didn't give him my reasoning as I feared he'd probably push back against the idea of being left alone for a while. Why Troy? Is something there important? Theseus asked. Never you mind that. There should be a ferryman in the port of Athens that can take us. By ship, it should take us at least 2 days. Come on. I spoke. I then started walking down the streets of Athens towards the port with Theseus behind me. Oh, come on. Can you at least give me a hint? Please. Theseus asked. It was at least a 30-minute walk to the ports and Theseus would not stop asking me about the trip. I told you it's not important. We're just gonna make a quick stop in Troy. I told the boy. But what's in Troy? He asked again. You'll find out when we get there. I told the boy. We made our way over to the dockmaster and paid for excursion to Troy. It was a pretty hefty sum, but with the drachmae I took off of Polyphemus and the bandits, I had plenty. I'm gonna warn you though, the seas have been pretty bad lately. So, just be prepared for anything. The dockmaster spoke. Of course. I replied. Of course, the gods are angry. Let's just hope they don't notice us. With our way paid, Theseus and I boarded our transport ship. It was a relatively small ship for a transport ship, but it was the only one they had that was willing to cross the sea at the moment. XXX. We were currently crossing the Aegean Sea. The seas were rough, the waves nearly swallowing us as we traveled. Not a good sign of things to come. We were halfway through our voyage, we just needed one more day. Excuse me. I looked up to see a young man standing in front of me. He was skinny and well built, but not the shape of a warrior. What is it? I asked. I was just wondering, with all of this going on, how is it you two are able to stay so calm? The man asked. I looked down at the sleeping Theseus and then back to the man. Well, the water has always calmed me. I think he just likes to sleep. I told the man. In truth, it seemed like Theseus thrived in the water just as I did. But he didn't need to know that. Really? Well, I can't blame him. I remember my days of youth being just as carefree. Seems like a lifetime ago, especially with these Persians invading. Anyways, it was nice to meet you. I think I should return to my own cot. The man spoke. He then waved and walked away. Asterisk flash. A bolt of lightning suddenly flashed across the sky. The beautiful blue sky had mysteriously turned gray. An ominous warning. Theseus, wake up. I spoke as I shook the boy. Huh? Are we there yet? Theseus asked groggily. No, just wake up. I spoke. I could feel it in the air. Bloodlust. The waves slammed into the ship and the wind turned vicious. This was a storm like no other. And I knew only one thing that could produce a storm like this. A god. In the middle of the ocean, I saw 2 figures rising out of the sea. A man and a woman. The man had green hair and blue eyes. He wore green bracers and a green cloth around his waist, with seaweed adorning his body. He wielded a golden trident and appeared to be as tall and as muscular as I was. The woman, however, had blue hair and blue eyes, and she appeared to be growing larger every moment, until she was as tall as the sky itself, easily much larger than Polyphemus by a large margin. But more strangely was her body. Her torso was that of a beautiful nymph, but below her waist was nothing but water. It was clear to me who these two were, Triton and Chimapolia, both at the same time. I grit my teeth and slowly grabbed my sword and shield. I felt a tight squeeze on my lower half and looked down to see Theseus staring at the two in fear. I couldn't blame him. I hadn't expected this confrontation to come so soon. Is this it, Triton? The feeling you got? Chimapolia asked, her voice thunderous and powerful. Yes, I feel it on this ship. Polyphemus' force. And another divinity. It would seem our brother was killed by another god. Triton spoke, his voice just as commanding. But which one? Chimapolia asked. Triton's eyes scanned the deck of the ship, passing over each and every one of us. Why don't I just drown the whole ship? No, I won't kill these people for the crimes of someone else, Triton replied. But it would be so much easier. You do not move until I tell you to, sister. I will handle this. Triton spoke. He leapt from the water and landed with a thud on our ship. The moment his feet touched the wood, the entire ship shook violently. The murderer of my brother is on this ship. Step forward and face divine judgment, and I promise the rest of these people can live. Continue to hide and I will let my sister drag this vessel beneath the waves. Triton spoke. This was the worst case scenario. 2 angered gods. But at least I was given a way out. If I fight smart. No. On land, I might have had a chance. But out here in the middle of the sea, these two have every advantage and I every disadvantage. If I speak up, I'll die. I took a deep breath and sighed. I then walked forward, and Triton turned his gaze to me. Brave. So, you killed my brother. Why? Triton asked. He attacked me, and I defended myself. I can't help it, he was weaker than me, I replied. What are you doing? Theseus whispered to me. I simply raised my hand, pushed the boy back. If you're looking for an apology, I'm afraid you're wasting your time. If you're looking for a fight, I slapped my shield twice as hard as I could. Then I'll be happy to send you to the next world. Triton smirked and raised his trident. I raised my shield and sword. We stared at each other, neither of us making a move. And yet, as I stared at him, all I could feel was death. I tried thinking of every way imaginable to attack Triton, but each thought I had ended with his trident running me through. Polyphemus was right, Triton is much stronger than he was. The gap is as vast as the ocean. I can't win this fight. Not right here. Though the fight didn't matter. As Triton and I stared each other down, a massive wave suddenly gripped the ship. I was shocked, while Triton seemed furious. I told you to stay out of this. He bellowed, lightning cracking off of his trident as he glared at his sister. And I'm tired of waiting to swat this fly. Chimapolia spoke. She raised her hand and the massive wave started heading back towards the seas. The people on board the ship screamed and held on for their lives as the boat that had been snatched into the air was suddenly plummeted back down. I slung my shield back onto my back as Triton retreated into the wave. I ran and grabbed Theseus as he struggled to hold on to the boat's rail. I grabbed the boy and held on tight as we rushed towards the sea below, my throat falling into my stomach. We hit the waters and the ship imploded. Everyone died on impact. Everyone but myself and miraculously Theseus. I was bleeding badly, my body nearly exploded from the impact. But I was still alive and was hanging on to Theseus and a piece of the ship that had survived. Though I was barely conscious, and water was filling my lungs quickly as I struggled to stay afloat. What have you done, sister? Triton asked the woman. Avenged our brother, Triton. Look, the man is dying, one more wave and he'll be gone. Chimapolia told the man. Triton grit his teeth in anger and turned his back to the woman. Chimapolia laughed and raised her hand. However, before she dealt the final blow, a loud roar startled her. Enough. From the skies descended a warrior unlike any other before him. His brown hair fluttering in the wind. His massive muscles, which could only be described as Herculean even amongst the gods, flexed. Chimapolia's fierce gaze turned to one of sheer terror and fear. Triton, however, turned back to the man and grinned. He raised his trident as the man raised his golden mace. Chimapolia fled the scene as Triton and the man charged each other. The two men clashed with each other, the sheer force of their strikes parting the skies above. Triton grit his teeth hard as he struggled to push back against the man, his mighty trident trembling as blood poured from his hands. A god that had me completely outclassed was getting pushed back with ease until finally he was sent flying. I was shocked. Who could send the mighty Triton flying with such ease? My savior turned and looked at me and smiled. Don't worry friend, you will live, he spoke. He pulled his ship towards me and the last thing I saw before passing out was his lion skin pelt. Chapter 17, Herculean Training. I jerked awake from my slumber. I hadn't thought to stop and think about my condition. I reached down and grabbed my chest in pain. I knew I was alive, because someone had saved me. I looked over from my cot to see that Theseus was still asleep. The fact he survived was a miracle. How is it this child seems to survive these things? A question for later. For now, I need to find out where we are. I tried to get up when a strong hand slowly pushed me back down. Awake and already trying to move. The blood of a god runs through you, all right. The man spoke. Brave Spartan, rest is important. You should know that. Whoever you are, you have my thanks for saving our lives. I spoke. Whoever I am. Have I been forgotten by my own people? The man spoke with a hearty laugh. He got closer to me, close enough for me to get a good look at him, and then it clicked. Hercules. Haha, that is right, the mighty Hercules? Lucky thing I was coming to find you, or else I fear Triton and his witch sister would have killed you. He spoke. He wasn't what I expected from the mighty Hercules. Not that he wasn't powerful, but tales always told of him as a bit arrogant. But the man I see in front of me is nothing of the sort. Well, I thank you for saving us, but I must be off. I spoke. Off? And do what? He asked. I need to get Theseus somewhere safe here and then I need to get back to Athens. I told the man. And do what? You don't get it. The moment you touch that sea, Chimapolia will be on you again. And at your current strength you'll die before you can beat her or Triton. Hercules explained. His attitude changed from laid back and easygoing to stern and serious. And I will not save you this time. Then what do you suppose I do? I asked the man, my voice lacking any form of restraint or respect. Hercules stroked his beard in deep thought for a good minute. He then turned his head and looked outside his hut. See that boulder over there? He asked as he pointed to a shiny black boulder that was in his yard. Yeah, what about it? I asked. Pick it up. He told me. I looked at him in confusion. What would lifting a boulder do? You want me to lift a boulder? I asked again. Yes, lift the boulder. If you can lift the boulder, then I'll escort you back to Athens. Free of charge. Hercules spoke. I nodded and got up from the ground. I walked out of the hut and over to the decent-sized boulder. I was confident I could lift it. After all, a boulder this size shouldn't be too much for me, especially since I had been much stronger since defeating Polyphemus. I crouched down and slid my hands under the boulder as far as I could and lifted. I lifted the boulder straight up with ease, is what I thought I'd do. But no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I strained myself, I could not lift the boulder even an inch. Come on, are you even trying? Hercules asked. He walked up behind me as I struggled to lift the boulder, and with one hand, he lifted the giant object up into the air with me still hanging onto it with ease. I dropped to the ground and looked up at the man in shock. Was I that weak compared to him? I guess that's why he's the god of strength. You couldn't lift this. You don't stand a chance at Chimapolia or Triton as you are now. Leaving my home will only result in your death, Hercules explained. What? What is that boulder? I asked. It's adamantine, the metal of the gods. It's still in its natural form and hasn't been processed by Hephaestus yet. All gods can lift it, but this one is much larger than most, which is why only I can lift it like this. Triton can lift it off the ground. You can't. Yet. Hercules spoke. What do you mean? I asked. I'm going to train you. I can't just let you go out there and get killed without putting up a proper fight. Hercules spoke. You're going to train me? I asked. Yes, in 6 months' time if you give it your all every day, I promise. I can make you strong enough to face and beat Triton. But I must warn you, it's going to be the worst experience of your life. Hercules spoke. I didn't waste time to think it over. The god of strength offered to train me himself. If I was going to beat Triton and his sister, I'm going to need to be stronger. I accept, I replied. Hercules grinned and then grabbed me up off the ground. Training begins now. Get down in a push-up position, Hercules told me. I nodded and got down on my hands, only for Hercules to place 2 slabs of stone of my back that nearly caused me to topple over. 1000 push UPS. Once you're done, then we'll move on to the next. Like I said, this will be more torment than you've ever experienced. But when we're done, not even Ares himself will be your match. Hercules spoke. This was hard. It was nearly impossible for me to lift myself. Nearly, that is. I have a challenge in front of me and I swear I will overcome it. And when I do, I will return home, and no one will stop me from ending this Persian war. XXX. Mount Olympus. Hestia? How dare you? Chimapolia screamed. Whatever are you talking about, my sweet niece? Hestia asked. You're the one who sent Hercules to stop Triton and me. I know you were. Chimapolia shouted to the top of her lungs. I don't know what you're talking about. Hestia replied. That's fine. Play dumb. Just know my father will know about this. And that brat who killed Polyphemus too. Chimapolia replied as she stormed out of Hestia's palace. Hestia shuddered as she knew Poseidon would most definitely look into the man who slew his son, and when he finds out who it is, he might just personally pay Hercules a visit. At his best, Hercules just might be able to beat Poseidon. If only barely. His strength is unrivaled amongst the Olympian gods. But that is just his strength. Poseidon has a vast array of powers that Hercules doesn't. Perhaps, I need to pay a visit to Hades. Or perhaps Hephaestus. Hestia wondered. Chapter 18, 6 months are up. These were the hardest 6 months of my life. Each and every day Hercules fought with me, beat me, trained me in every form of combat he knew, beat into me his strength unrivaled. Until finally the day came. In 6 months' time, you've made strides. You're not that weak man I saved all that time ago. You're a real man now. And now it's time for your final test. Hercules spoke. I'm ready for whatever you throw at me. Bring it on, I told the man. I stood ready to face whatever challenge the god threw at me. You and I are going to fight, Hercules exclaimed. He took off his toga and stood before me in nothing but his skirt. I gulped heavily. I had sparred with Hercules many times over the past 6 months. But this felt different. Hercules had always held back. But I have a feeling this time would be different. And I couldn't help but feel excitement. I grinned, happily, and assumed my fighting stance. Hercules must have been able to feel my excitement as he too grinned and prepared himself. Hercules and I both charged each other, the force of our steps cratering the ground below us. When I met the man, I reeled back and we headbutted each other. NGGHHHHH. Hercules and I both grunted as our heads collided. I smiled at Hercules. And he smiled back. The force of our headbutt sent out shockwaves across the land and sea and air. Hercules reeled his fist back and punched me right in the stomach, lifting me up off the ground. He then grabbed me, and power bombed me back onto the ground, causing it to crater. I spit up blood from the force of his attacks. But I didn't give up. I wrapped my legs around his head and shifted my weight. I threw him across the plain and right through a tree. I rolled over and pushed myself up on my feet and chased after the man. Hercules recovered and ran towards me. We both reeled back, and our fists met each other. I was told no powers. This would be a simple straight-up fight. Hands and nothing else. Our fists pushed against each and slowly but surely Hercules was pushing me back. I stuck my other hand out and grabbed Hercules' forearm. I shifted my weight and tried to use the momentum to throw Hercules over my shoulder, but the man planted his feet and punched me in my side, forcing me to let go. He wrapped his arms around my waist and lifted me up into the air. He then slowly brought me back down and slammed me on my head. He then got back to his feet and grabbed my legs and started swinging me around. He then threw me back towards our training grounds. He jumped into the air and tried to land on top of me with his fist, but I moved out of the way as his fist cratered the ground. I brought my hand up and backhanded him across the field. I was actually holding my own. Hercules still held the advantage by a wide margin, but I was still capable of holding my own against the man. These past 6 months weren't for nothing. Hercules erupted out of the ground and jumped into the air. Is that the best you can do? He asked me. Feeling the challenge, I jumped into the air to meet him head-on, but I miscalculated. I struck out at him, but I missed. Hercules wrapped his arms around me as we fell and pointed my head towards the ground. I hope you survive this. Hercules spoke. I watched as the ground steadily approached. I reached up and used as much strength as I could muster to try and free myself before I hit the ground. I didn't free myself completely, but I did just enough to avoid having my head smashed in. Welcome back to getting your ass kicked 101, Hercules joked. He reached down and grabbed my leg. Do you yield? He asked as he held me up. I shook my head and punched Hercules in his gut. He heaved heavily and I felt his grip on my leg loosen. I swung my free leg back and kneed Hercules in his face, causing him to let go. As I dropped towards the ground, I stuck my hands out and kicked towards the man. I hit Hercules in his chest and sent careening backwards. XXX. An hour later. I was barely standing, blood leaking from my nose, mouth, and head. I had hit my limit. Hercules, while heavily bruised, was in much better shape and could definitely go for another few hours or even a whole day if he needed to. Can you still fight? He asked me. Of course. I replied as I assumed my fighting stance once again. My arms were heavy, and my legs felt like they would buckle at any moment. But nevertheless, I would be ready. Hercules nodded and rushed towards me. I lifted my leg one after the other and eventually managed to reach my stride as well. Ugh! Rayaiaik! I shouted. I put the remaining strength I had into my fist and I punched at Hercules and hit him in the chest. He grinned and punched me right back. I felt my entire body go numb as I spit up or blood. I stumbled backwards and slowly I felt my legs give out. I fell and hit the ground hard. My vision was blurring. I am defeated. All this time spent for nothing. Was my journey for nothing? Am I forever cursed to be weak? Always losing? Do you want to lose? Who speaks to me, I wondered. Who has always spoken to you? I felt my gaze turning, focusing on only what I wanted. Focusing only on that which has been with me always. The ocean. Old friend. You call out to me in my time of need. I have always been with you. You just never could hear me. Only see me. Come to me, Timaeus of Sparta. Heed my call once more. It was if nature. No instinct itself took over my body. I turned over on my stomach and began crawling towards the sea. Inch by inch. Little by little. Until I was within arm's reach of it. Of my old friend. Accept me into your body. Feel my power bolstering yours. I stuck my hand into the water and felt a wave of relief wash over me. And then power. The water crawled up my arm, cleaning and healing my wounds along the way until finally I was standing once more. I looked down over my previously worn and torn body and grinned. I felt something new. Something fierce flowing through my body. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. And another. And another. And another. The waves rose and fell with each of my breaths, dancing and splashing to the sound of my beating heart. The ocean isn't just the sea. It's life. Power. My friend. My ally. And mine to command. I spoke. I raised my hands up into the air and opened my eyes. The waves stood over me, climbing high into the air. I opened my eyes and smiled. I lowered my arms down over my chest and the waves settled back down. I turned towards Hercules and saw him grinning ear to ear. Well done, Timaeus. You have finally awoken. It's time for us to take a trip. Hercules spoke. He looked at my confused face and grinned even larger. It's time. Chapter 19, Return to Athens. Hercules had been packing up his belongings. We were to move soon. He wouldn't tell me where. All I knew was we were going back to Athens. We packed our things and moved to Hercules' ship. Theseus was still unconscious. He had been the entire 6 months and showed no signs of waking anytime soon, so we had to move him with us. It was just too risky to leave him here with no one to watch over him. Hercules agreed with me. Once we were set and ready, we set out to sea. Hopefully things wouldn't be so difficult this time. The seas were much calmer now, and we were making good time. Herc's ship was faster than anything I've ever seen. What should have taken us at least a week was almost over. We touched down in Athens and Hercules tied the ship to a dock. Are you sure someone isn't going to steal your ship? I asked the man. I didn't think it would be safe for anyone to just leave their stuff where it could be stolen. Oh, don't worry. The anchor's too heavy even for 100 men to try and lift. This thing isn't going anywhere. Hercules replied with confidence. All right, if you say so. I shrugged my shoulders and followed Hercules. We walked through the plains of Athens, the usual heat, feeling like a nice breeze now. We walked towards Athens, but as we did, we noticed that something was wrong. Even the roads to Athens were usually full of people, day and night. It was always a bustling city. And yet as I look around, I see nothing. Hercules, something is wrong. There shouldn't be so little people. I spoke. You are right. But what is happening? I've never seen Athens so empty. Hercules replied. We looked around the city and when I saw a merchant, I questioned her. Hey, you there, woman. I pointed at the woman. Yes, sir, she asked. Hercules and I approached her shop and she looked to be a little frightened. What has happened here? Where is everyone? I asked. They are heading south to Boeotia, just south of Thebes. There is to be a battle. Sparta and the rest of Greece are taking a final stand against the Persians, she explained. And then it clicked in my mind, that is right. I remembered, they were gearing up for the final battle. The whole reason I was going to Troy in the first place was so that I could leave Theseus someplace safe. I became so caught up with training and wanting to beat Triton that I forgot about the war. Hercules. No, we have a journey to finish, let the Spartans handle the Persians. Hercules spoke. I'm sorry, but I cannot. Before I was whatever I am now, I was a proud Spartan. My people, my brothers are going to war. I am not going to sit back and let them face the monster that is Xerxes alone. I cannot risk battling the Persians. Hercules spoke. And I'm not asking you to. All I ask of you is that you watch over the boy, make sure he is safe. From this, all of this, Hercules, this started with my king and me. I have to be there to see how this ends. If I can secure the freedom we fought for, then all of this would be worth it. Very well, I shall await you here in Athens. We will continue once you've returned victorious. Now, go Spartan. Go and fight well. Hercules replied. I nodded and bowed to the man. Something not worthy of a Spartan. But I had long since discarded my Spartan pride. When I lived, I lost the right to be a Spartan. I reached up and grabbed my robes and discarded them, leaving me in nothing but my Spartan cape. I had my shield strapped to my back, a spear in one hand and sword strapped to my waist. With everything ready, I marched to Plataea, alone. The lone warrior. I marched through the plains of Greece, the eyes of wonder staring at me. A lone Spartan. A renegade. I disregarded them. I had a cause. To end this war. Then face whatever it is the gods have thrown at me. For so long I've been fighting a war on two fronts. But now, things are different. For hours. For days. For weeks. I march without stopping, not to rest. There is no time for that. There is only battle. I march. For freedom. Free my family. For all of Greece. I marched. Chapter 20, Battle of Plataea. The army was large, nearly over 40,000 men altogether. And yet despite its vast numbers I could hear clearly a very familiar tale. Remember us, he said to me. That was his hope. Should any free soul come across that place, in all the countless centuries yet to be, may all our voices whisper to you, from the ageless stone. Go tell a Spartan's passerby, that here, by Spartan law, we lie. And so, my king died. And my brothers died. Nearly a year ago today. Long I pondered my king's cryptic talk of victory. But time has proven him wise. For from free Greek to free Greek, the word was spread, that bold Leonidas and his 300, so far from home, laid down their lives. Not just for Sparta, but for all Greece. And the promise this country holds. I heard that voice and knew it all too well. He was fulfilling our king's last orders. Dilios, my friend. I did not speak, I did not interrupt him. Instead, I listened as he did what he did best. Now, here on this ragged patch of earth called Plataea, Xerxes' hordes face obliteration. Dilios screamed. Ohu, ohu, ohu. I raised my spear and joined my brothers in our chant for the first time in a year. I could feel it once again, the Spartan blood flowing through me. An entire year of battling these strange things happening to me, to fighting gods, and training with them. But now, for the first time in so very long, I feel it again. I feel it. Just there the barbarians huddle, sheer terror gripping tight, their hearts with icy fingers knowing full well what merciless horrors they suffered at the swords and spears of 300. Yet, they stare now across the plain at 10,000 Spartans, commanding 30,000 free Greeks. Dilios turned towards us and raised his spear high. Ohu, 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 ohu. We all chanted once again, our voices so loud they drown out Zeus' thunder, feeling the intensity, the heat of the moment, the thrill. I stepped forward. I walked through the men, and they stared at me, their eyes wide in shock. I could feel it. The captain. Captain Timaeus. He's alive. The whispers and murmuring of my brothers drew Dilios' attention. He turned to me and smiled. My brother. Seems we've both a story to tell. Dilios spoke. For later. For now, we have a battle to win. I told the man. The floor is all yours, Captain. Dilios spoke. No, my friend. This is your tale. See it through till the end. Dilios looked at me and after a moment he nodded. The enemy outnumber us a paltry 3-1, good odds for any Greek. This day we rescue a world from mysticism and tyranny, and usher in a future brighter than anything we can imagine. Dilios spoke. He moved his spear over to his other hand and placed his helmet on top his head. Here, Captain. One of the soldiers tapped me on the back and handed me a spare helmet. I looked the man in his eyes and nodded, fighting so hard to hold back the tears behind mine. My eyes flickered. I took the helmet and threw it on top of my head. For the first time in so long, I was a Spartan once more. Give thanks, men, to Leonidas and the brave 300. To victory, Dilios shouted. His voice loud and powerful. He led the charge towards the Persians. We all shouted as we rushed towards the horde of Persians, their numbers so large the ground beneath them invisible. Yet still we charge. I take the lead. I run as fast as I can, leaving Dilios and the Greek army behind. I shouted. I raised my spear and ran headfirst into the Persian army. Bodies flying everywhere. I strike. I cover my spear in a quake bubble and swing it. The sky cracks and a wave of destruction rushes out from the point of impact. The endless wave of Persians in front of me is parted momentarily. I swung my spear around and the force of it shattered the shields of the Persians rushing me. I spun around and slashed them across the chest with my spear. Each time I kill a man, 100 more of them fill the spot. His army is unending. Even as I sit here and slaughter them, they still come unending. I swing my spear around and slam it into the ground. I raise my fist into the air and my muscles expand. Brea! I swung my fist so hard it felt like my muscles would tear off of my arm. Asterisk crack. The air around my fist cracks and a massive wave of destruction rushes out from my fist. This wave spreads larger than my previous ones as I put more force into this one. The ground trembles and tears apart. Persians and immortals alike falling to their deaths. Spartans, follow me, and destroy the Persians. I pick up my spear and run forward again. Each and every Greek behind me ready to die for the sake of our country. I twirl my spear around and jump into the air. My eyes turn a hazy white. I summon another quake bubble. And as I land, I slam the spear into the ground. The earth cracks open and the ground splinters more. The destruction that rushes out, not only pulverizes but slashes and tears open the flesh of the Persians. Their magicians launch balls of fire and lightning at me. I raise my spear and summon another quake bubble. I strike out at the magic attacks and my quake cuts them in half. The monsters of Xerxes' army come out. Beast with 4 arms. Beastmen, animals that walk on 2 legs. Creatures made of the earth itself. I meet these creatures head on. The 4-armed monster wields 4 blades, each a different shape and meant for different things. It does not matter. I slam my shield into the beast's chest, and he drops, dead. A mere strike and I could kill a man of his size. The beastman approaches next. His body like that of a large lion, his fangs sharp and claws larger than my own head. I grab my spear and I thrust it through his chest, piercing his heart and killing him instantly. The creature made of earth sees this and fear rushes through his body. He turns around to flee, but like we are taught, no prisoners, no mercy. I raise my spear and throw it with as much force as I could muster. My spear pierced through the creature's hard exterior, but he kept moving. So, I raised my free hand and once again struck out with a quake. The creature's body explodes into pieces. I walk up to the dead thing and retrieve my spear. I raise it to the sky and let out one loud and thunderous roar. The ground shakes, and the ocean nearby roars. Mardonius, leader of this Greek contingent, fears for his life. His sweat spilling onto the floor. This is it. Do you see us, Artemis? Stelios? Do you see us, Leonidas? Victory is just within our grasp. Spartans? Oh-huh, 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 oh-huh. The Spartan army suffers casualties. Yet still we stand strong. We continue our final push back against Xerxes and his men. XXX. Do you see this lady Hestia? The Spartans. The Greek. They're winning. Yes, my dear. And he is thriving. More so than I could have imagined. This warms my heart to see my nephew so happy. Hestia spoke. I can shove this right up Poseidon's. My lady? Urgent news. One of Hestia's maidens shouted as SH ran into Hestia's chambers. What is it? Hestia asked in a panic. The Amazons are under attack. By who? Triton and Chimapolia mistress. Oh no, send word to Hercules quickly. Hestia ordered. And you, take this to the boy and guide him to Amazonia. Hestia ordered. She reached into a box and pulled out a golden trident. There I will meet with him. Hercules was supposed to take him there from Athens, but things have changed. Go quickly. XXX. Keep pushing, men. We're almost there. I shouted. The end of the enemy's soldiers was well in sight. We had them pushed back onto the beach. The only thing left to do was kill them all and burn their ships. Once that was done, Greece's victory will be complete. I raise my spear and summon a quake bubble. Who wants to die next? I asked the Persians. He's going to do it again. Look out. I swung my spear and cleaved the ground in front of me in twain. The wave of destruction rushed out and engulfed the Persians and their ships within its mighty reach. The ocean itself parted way under my might. We rushed the Persians. One last time. Our numbers dwindled down only to 35,000, meaning there was 5,000 dead Greek. But that number greatly paled in comparison to the hundreds of thousands that Xerxes had lost. With their lead forces dead, the remaining Persians fell quickly. We killed and killed until there was finally no one left. Until we had done it. We had won. We raised the torches and all together we burned the Persian ships to the ground. Greece, we are victorious. Rah! Our shouts of victory shook the heavens themselves. Without a doubt, the gods above heard our cries.